using Zoom webinar for our meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise the hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised at the appropriate time in the meeting. As a preliminary matter, I'm Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Select Board members in the order in which I see you. Melissa Murphy.
Present.
Dawn, your audio just went out, I think. Are you frozen?
Sorry, my internet went out. I got completely kicked off. I'm going to start over with confirming the board members. Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Melissa Murphy.
Present.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
Is Val here? I'm sorry, there are a lot of people on here right now.
No, not yet.
Town staff members, Stephen Murphy.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Vincent Murphy.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Holly Backus.
Present.
Kamal McCarthy.
Present.
Robert McNeil.
Present.
Beatrice Maria.
Present.
Jericho Mealy.
In attendance.
William Pittman.
Present.
Brian Turbin.
In attendance.
Janet Schulte.
Present.
David Gray.
Present.
David's in the field, I think. Sheila Lucy.
I'm here.
There are a number of you that are also present, I believe, for the committee appointments, and I'm going to be going through and reading your names at that time. So I'm going to forgo that portion. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment as previously noted through the Zoom webinar functions. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share the screen of your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, people may raise their hands for questions or comments. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And every vote tonight will be taken via roll call. We've already covered this meeting being audio and video recorded. And I'm going to go through and announce the applications that have been received for this second round, like I did last week. Historic District Commission Associate. There is one seat available and one applicant. It's Carrie Thornwell, who is the incumbent. Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust Fund, one seat available and one applicant, Brooke Moore, who is the incumbent. Nantucket Historical Commission, there are 3 seats available and there are 4 applicants. Thomas Murray Montgomery, Angus McLeod, Milton Rowland are the 3 incumbents, and Linda Williams has applied as a new applicant. Nantucket Historical Commission alternate. There's 1 seat available and there are actually no applicants for that. The incumbent, Don DeMichelle, has not reapplied. Planning Board alternate. There's 1 seat available and no applicants. David Callahan, the incumbent, has not reapplied. Real Estate Assessment Committee. There are 2 seats available and 2 applicants. John Brescher and Thomas Barada, both incumbents. Roads and Right-of-Ways Committee. There are 3 seats available and 2 applicants. Edward Gillum and Nelson Eldridge, both incumbents reapplying, and Leslie Forbes, incumbent, is not reapplying. So there's an open seat there. Scholarship Committee. There are 4 seats available and 5 applicants. Lee Saperstein, Leslie Forbes, Margaret Detmer, all incumbents have reapplied. And and there was a vacant seat. And then Catherine Manchester and Rebecca Woodley Oliver are both new applicants. Steamship Authority Port Council, there's 1 seat available and 1 applicant. Nathaniel Lowell, the incumbent, has applied. And the Tree Advisory Committee, there is 1 seat available and no applicants. Ben Shampoo, the incumbent, has not reapplied. So there's an open seat there. So there are still remain a number of open seats. I think we'll be re-advertising for these open positions after the appointments on June 23rd. And a little bit later in the agenda, we are going to have the people whose names we read last week introduce themselves if they wish to. Erica?
Just wanted to note that a couple of people did reply or respond late. Due to the new policy, we will not be putting their names forward for the June annual appointments, but we will hold on to their applications for them to be considered in our kind of second summer round.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up, Resilient Nantucket Toolkit announcement.
I believe our preservation planner, Holly Backus, is going to give us a brief overview of the toolkit. Holly?
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the Resilient Toolkit was created as part of our MVP Action Grant that you all are familiar with now. We're at the end of our MVP Action Grant. Everything will have to be completed with the state by June 30th. This toolkit is now available on the town's website. It's intended to provide information on flood risk, flood preparedness, flood insurance, flood recovery, and flood adaptation alternatives useful for historic properties, cultural sites, and the island's larger cultural landscape. It also recognizes the importance of personal preparedness. It offers resources to support the preparation of emergency plans for families, homes, and businesses. This toolkit should serve as an island-wide resource for real estate and insurance professionals, conservationists, property owners, landholding organizations. This toolkit provides a repository of documents, articles, and visualizations for the Nantucket's whole community. It can be read in its entirety, or you can actually explore certain links found throughout the document, giving the reader the broadcast content for climate change and resiliency planning. Reviewing the resourcing as many elements of this toolkit as possible is recommended, but to access a specific topic of interest, you can just click through and get right to it through the table of contents. However, this is important to understand that through the increased public awareness and action can be from the whole community is achieved. The town of Nantucket, working with its partners and residents, will develop island-wide adaptation mitigation strategies to provide risk and response to climate impacts and sea level rise, and this will be ongoing. The individual actions of Nantucket households, property and business owners, and community organizations will ensure a scalable and comprehensive resiliency effort. And we thank our consultants for providing this, as well as our public and private partnerships through such organizations like the Nantucket Preservation Trust, Acclimate Nantucket. I want to make sure that this toolkit is used in the future. It will be updated as all living documents are. So please take a look at it. And if there's any questions from the town or general public, please reach out, and I am here for available to go over any questions you may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Holly, so much. Does anybody have a question?
Thanks so much, Holly. The next announcement is about town meeting. Town meeting is coming up this Saturday, June 5th, starting at 9 a.m. outdoors at the Backus playing fields behind the elementary and intermediate schools. The rain date is Sunday, June 6th at 9 a.m. We are carefully watching the weather and fingers crossed. Our sewer director is going to give us a brief update on the Surfside Road Sewer Improvement Project. David?
Good evening, Libby. Nothing near as exciting as last week by any means. We've been up on Surfside Road. We're now in front of the intermediate school, making good progress now because it's not nearly as deep as it was. We're in the 10 to 12 foot depth now instead of the 18 foot depth that we have been. We have run across some either older utilities or unmarked stuff, which has slowed us down a little bit. But we're trying to get everything done and get done at the time that we were given by our waiver. And I had to address that issue again this morning with the contractor, that they need to be more diligent on the time getting done. Other than that, we're moving along very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that wraps up the announcement for this evening. We'll move over to our COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any opening public comments? Okay, seeing none. I will move over to the report from our Human Services Director. Or would Roberto?
Yeah, I'll be doing it both. Jericho has to run a clinic. So thank you. We've been doing surprisingly well. We've had a pretty busy week so far. And one of the things that's been doing very well is that over the course of the last 7 days, we've only had 3 positive cases. And those 3 positives are actually very mild. So things are going very well, knock on wood. Over the last 7 days, the positivity rate has only been 1.7%. We've been out of that red category for about 2 weeks now. The only town that was red as of last week was actually on the Vineyard. I believe it was Edgartown. And it's the only red town in the whole state. So it's a little interesting to see how that's going. As far as the vaccination clinics are going, I didn't get a chance to look. I was out today and yesterday. I was out since last Thursday. So I didn't get a chance to look at the most recent numbers, but at last week's school clinic, we gave 68 doses to the schools, and we had another school clinic today. We are having drive-through clinics every Wednesday from 5 to 7 at the Saltmarsh Center. That's a walk-in basis. There's no appointment necessary. We did put it in order for Pfizer this week, so we will now be able to offer through the town both Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson vaccine. really moving forward with that. And I believe we have hit at that 50% of the town fully vaccinated number. We crossed the 10,000 dose threshold, fully vaccinated dose threshold this last week. So we're moving forward. 2 weeks from now, we will be lifting the state of emergency. And at that point, we will be going back to the full normal. And we should be meeting the next day on the 16th, I guess, in person. And after that, the Board of Health will be on the 17th in person.
Well, okay, so maybe don't get too carried away with in person yet, because not to interrupt, Madam Chair, and
That's it.
I know you're looking forward to being in person, but we are waiting for some additional guidance from the legislature as to whether or not the remote allowance will continue.
Got it.
Town council and I spoke about it today. There was a hearing this afternoon about this and about some other measures, hopefully, that will be extended. So I believe that at this point, the board will have a discussion on your agenda next week as to the in-person discussion. Most recently, prior to the governor's announcements about the state of emergency being lifted and the May 29th restrictions being reduced, I believe the consensus of the board was to continue in remote mode until through the summer. So I think, but then the governor made some changes. So I think we're just going to confirm that or not at the board's meeting next week. And we have had some internal discussions, I guess, just while we're talking about it, about in-person for some boards, committees, and commissions. The regulatory boards are the top priority right at the moment. And we are examining ways, I think Erica hopefully will be able to talk a little bit more about this at your meeting next week. We're examining ways as to how at least consultants and possibly members of the public could continue remoting in. It's a bit technologically challenging to do that. It sounds easy, but it is not. So we're trying to get that figured out. And so Roberto, I think, we're asking all the committees and boards to check in with Erica before actually scheduling and going live into an in-person meeting. But there really is no reason not to, other than we need to transition back with the space, because the space is quite limited. And we got to get some challenges figured out. So, but anyway.
And that was really it. Just that last I had heard that we were moving back to in person. So that's good information for today. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Jason? Sorry, there's a lot of people on the screen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We can always go to the raise hand function if that's easier. Just if it's
Yeah, I would suggest that people might want to do that for this meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Roberto. Sewer test. Do we have any? Because that's one of our top 3 measurements now. Sewer test, and then how's the walk-in clinic? Are we getting 5, 10 people? To me, it's worth it if we get 2 people on a Wednesday night. But I'm just curious.
So the sewer test for this week hasn't come back yet, because Monday was the day, it was a holiday, so I don't know if they were able to get any testing off. But as far as the clinics go, we did at the school clinic about 68. I think at all the walk-in clinics we've done so far, we've been getting about 15 to 20 every time. So we're doing pretty well.
Christy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the state of emergency lifting this month, I know right now masks are still required on public transportation. Would that be discontinued, or would they still be required on things like the ferries?
I think it depends. As far as the states, Massachusetts state of emergency, it's lifted. And I think only things that are state regulated, we would probably have to lift at the same time. Things that are federally regulated, we have no jurisdiction over. So I think for as long as the FAA requires masks on planes, we'll need masks on planes. I don't know how that affects our ferry because it crosses federal waters, but we can get back.
Melissa?
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Roberta, that might be really helpful if we could have something succinct next week, both verbally to share and maybe even in writing to just help everyone communicate with those, how this is affecting Nantucket. I've heard some conflicting information too, so it'd be awesome to have it in one place.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have other reports, comments, updates this evening? Is this our quickest COVID update ever?
I hope they make them go shorter.
Okay, I'm going to move on to public comment for non-COVID-19 items that are otherwise not on our agenda for discussion this evening. I'm not seeing any hands raised. There's no new business that I'm aware of. I will move on to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. We could take them all as one motion unless anyone has any questions or comments or changes.
So moved. It's Matt. So moved.
There you are. Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor by roll call of items 1 through 4. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Those carry unanimously.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Erica, what?
Who seconded that motion?
Matt made it and Melissa seconded it? Was that right?
Christy seconded.
All right. Citizen departmental requests, post Memorial Day weekend report, police, fire, licensing, health, and DPW. Libby, I'll let you.
Sure. So early last week, we had a internal meeting about Memorial Day and getting ready for it because it was expected to be, quite significant. And then the weather sort of changed things a bit. But in the interim, we had asked the departments to give a report about activity levels and any issues that happened. So I'll just indicate who's got a report. It's the police chief, the fire chief, the licensing administrator, if Amy is on. There are a lot of people on here. Oh, Amy, there you are. Thank you. Roberto, are you still on? I don't know if you're going to be able to give one or not for the health department. I know you.
Libby, can I just say one thing? There's a number of people here for committee appointments. Would you mind just turning your cameras off until we get to that part? It sorts better for us to see who's ready to speak right now. Thank you so much. It makes it a little bit easier for me.
That is a bit easier. Thank you all for doing that. So police chief first, and then fire chief, licensing, health, public works, and culture and tourism. And they're just going to speak, just a bit about the weekend. And I think we all know it was quieter than it might have been without the stormy weather that caused multiple boat cancellations. Chief Pittman?
Yep. Good evening. Libby's right. It was the weather that made it essentially not much worse than 2020 was in terms of the calls for service for police. What I did is I compared 2020 and 2021 to 2019 pre-pandemic numbers. And even going with that, we were 50% less in 2021 than we had in 2019. So we made no arrests over the weekend, and there weren't any issues that really rose to anybody's concern level. So it was a pretty good weekend for the most part.
Thanks, Chief. Chief Murphy?
Just following off of Chief Pittman, we were exactly almost the same in numbers. What he said, we were up from last year, of course, but considerably down from the year before. We were still running an average about 14 runs, 15 runs a day from Friday through Monday, with a structure fire thrown in on Friday. So we've been very busy all in all. Occupancy checks were done Friday night, Saturday and Sunday. Everybody was in compliance. There was one verbal warning for one place that was a little overcrowded. That was corrected, and no written warnings or citations were issued.
Thanks, Chief. Amy Baxter?
Thank you. And as Chief Murphy said, I did similar walkthroughs and inspections of the nightclub licenses in several other locations, and they were checking and keeping their numbers. There were lines in some places where they met their occupancy. The one thing we were kind of looking to see, and weather caused us not able to see this, is how some of these outdoor spaces might be affected. Again, we're trying to make sure that it's not an increase in occupancy in some of these places, but we'll have to kind of look at that as we move on. But we did start to notice some areas of concern in some of these setups because we now are in full occupancy mode. So in some places it might affect the parking and mid-island type of places or traffic flow and things of that sort. So I think we'll be discussing some reduction in spaces or editing some of those spaces to deal with those issues. And then also awaiting the state update on expansion or extending the outdoor spaces. So I think we'll be updating you in the next few weeks as that goes on. But no major issues that we're seeing.
Thanks, Amy. Roberto?
Echoing the same, we had a few people out over the weekend, and it seemed a lot quieter than normal. It was just, well, normal for 2019. And it seemed, things seemed to be okay. Nothing really good. Some of the spot checks that the staff did.
Roberto, you're cutting in and out of it.
Oh, sorry, it's the directional microphone. Sorry. The staff was out, and it didn't seem too bad. They did some spot checks, and it looked like a quiet weekend in comparison to 2 years ago. So nothing bad from our end.
Great, thank you very much. Public Works Director, Rob McNeil.
Thank you. Good evening. The good news over the weekend was some of our newly installed drainage structures were given a test, and they passed with flying colors. I'm happy to report. The ground is thirsty, so a lot of the rain that did come was soaked up right away, which was nice. We needed the rain. The wind brought down a number of limbs, but it was pretty limited. We did not have any major tree damage, which was also welcome. And I think speaks a little bit to the preemptive trimming, both by the town and National Grid that's been taking place over the last year. Beyond that, we did notice during our trash runs that a lot of visitors appeared to be throwing bags of household trash in the cans around in the barrels around the core on their way out. And that is that's a challenge that we're faced with because unlike residents or businesses that violate where they typically are throwing away mail with identifying information in it, people that are visiting are not necessarily doing the same thing. So it's something we're going to continue to watch, and certainly it's something, it's not new. It's just that was what was noticeable this particular weekend.
Melissa?
Thanks, Don. Through you, Rob, what ideas do you have that, for us to help spread that word to that household trash does not belong in public waste bins? It seems like this problem gets worse and worse every year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've worked with law enforcement, specifically with the chief's office, to be able to enforce when we see this happen. We have every barrel labeled specifically against illegal dumping so that we can take enforcement action. And we do spot checks very regularly, particularly in the busy summer months, to be able to take action when we find these kind of things and have identifiable information. Short of that, it's about seeing something and saying something. And I myself and some staff included have, spoken to people that we've seen be, doing this kind of activity. And, you know, I know the chief and Officer Mack downtown, anyone that's out and about, hopefully the CSOs are trained that way as well. We've seen a pretty dramatic drop in the off-season violations. And that's because we developed a pretty strong program, and we've been taking action against violators. So to date, we're over 200 notifications, and I think over 100 tickets that have been written.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Christy?
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that it was a safe weekend. And in terms of restaurants, I know we really didn't get to see kind of how the outdoor dining could have worked kind of at our capacity. But I heard we might be rolling back a little bit, and I just want to think about kind of, you know, one of the board's goals is to be less car centric. So if we're focused on just parking and not just, you know, expanding outdoor spaces or expanding, you know, quality of life downtown, that's just something that I want to keep in mind, that we would kind of want to use this COVID time to test out what outdoor dining could look like, so that maybe it could be something in the future. So kind of rolling back, I would try to roll back a little bit slower if possible. And then on that, I'm just wondering, is there any update on the state of emergency in terms of outdoor dining, or will that end in August?
So as far as the update, I know the governor, I think it's part of all the same, I want to say it's the same bill with the open meeting and all the different things that are attached to the state of emergency ending. So we haven't gotten confirmation of that extension yet. And that's simply an extension that gives local licensing authorities the authority to approve these outdoor spaces. It's not required. It's just giving that local authority and not having to go through state. So, but I do expect it probably will be extended, and any editing of space and things of that sort are in areas where there's some public safety concerns or, you know, traffic flow, where the tough part here is we don't have equitable space for everyone to do this. So we're also hearing from restaurants who don't have space and are asking how are they competing with a restaurant downtown that has a full street closed off and can double their space. So we're kind of looking into now, as the state and the ABCC suggested, that getting these folks that wish to continue in these spaces to go through the usual process and start working on that and identify where there's special permits and zoning and other issues. So there's other issues that were allowed because of the pandemic, but now that we're fully open, it's starting to affect other businesses and things of that sort. So it's not purely just parking. It's really a number of factors that we have to consider now that everyone's open. So we've already seen the impact, and we have to wait and see when the weather's good, how it is. But it's just going through each one and seeing how maybe we can make some adjustments to make it a bit better and more equitable. And one other thing, as far as extensions, the thing that is ending, I'm pretty sure because they rejected it at the legislative level, is the to-go alcohol for those on-premise licenses and restaurants. We're allowed to sell alcohol with to-go food orders, and it does not look like that will extend past June the 15th, so that will be ending.
Thanks, Amy. Sorry.
Matt, yeah, a follow up on Amy's, if that's all right. Okay, I'll assume it's all right. No, it's going to be difficult because a lot of people have put a lot of effort and expense into, you know, setting up for this with the assumption it was going to operate through the summer. So I understand, you know, sort of, and I think the equity, the fairness, and the expenses people have put in. Some of them look really nice and should remain. And so the hard part is, how do we do that in a way that's fair and to the public and to the individuals who have done that? And I think that's going to be a fairly tricky, it's going to be pretty tough to navigate, Amy. And I don't, you have a tough job to be able to do that. And I think the weather, I think we dodged a bullet this weekend. I think if it had been really nice, I think we would have had a lot of problems already. I think we would have been, I think people would be beating down our door complaining about things more so than they have. And so I think we've got from now till sort of third week of June to, put this thing together the best way we can.
Yeah, it's definitely, and we'll keep apprised of it. And if there's, problems, look for some sort of solution, more management by the location on whatever the issue is. So we certainly, it's going to be impossible to be completely fair, but doing our best on that regard.
Thank you.
Our Culture and Tourism Director, Janet Schulte.
Good evening. Thank you. We had 1,008 visitors in the month of May and about 150, 160 over the weekend. Last year we had 25 people between May 18th and May 31st. And in 2019, we had 2,500 people come in. So it's coming back, but it's coming back slowly. And I think that sorry for the pun, but the weather dampened people's interest in coming to visit the island.
Thanks, Janet. I think that's it for that report.
Okay. We have the town clerk, Nancy Holmes, request for appointment of constable.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put forward Michael Day's name. I've been talking to Mike for about 6 months now, and I really appreciate his willingness to step forward as both a constable and an election worker. He's expressed an interest for the long term. And as a younger person with a younger family, I really appreciate that, because we need those types of people, but it's very hard with how hard people work and how many jobs they have for them to even have the willingness to consider working elections and town meetings. And I think that Mike will be perfect. He has a background in, an educational background in political science and criminal justice. And he also, coaches the middle school kids. And I think he does a lot of community service. So I think he'll be great.
You just need a motion for the appointment.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Parentella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Department of Culture and Tourism, request for resolution for renewal of designation of Nantucket Cultural District. Janet?
Thank you. We're in our 5th year of our initial designation as having a Nantucket Cultural District, which primarily overlaps with the historic core. Part of the process for application requires a resolution from the select board to move forward with this process. And I put one of those in your packet. I'm happy to read that. But I'd also like, if possible, to share, if Erica could share the map of what we're planning to do, because when you come to a point of redesignation, you're allowed to expand the boundaries of the district. And one of the issues that we had in 2016 was that we were not allowed to include three organizations that were significant to the cultural legacy of Nantucket. One was the Museum of African American History. One was the Nantucket, Lightship Basket Museum, which is now merged with the NHA. And the other was the Egan Maritime Institute, all of which tell important parts of our heritage. So the blue line that you see on here is our original district. The red line that goes down Fair Street, Jefferson Lane, Pleasant Street, and then York Street, Union Street, Francis Street, and back to the parking lot expands the district. The other important part about this request that I've discussed with the Mass Cultural Council is as people walk down Fair Street, they're going to see the work of the Preservation Trust and the work that this town and volunteers have done to preserve the architecture, and see many of the 800 pre-Civil War homes that are part of our cultural legacy as well. So that's one of the proposals that we're putting forward in this application. I'm happy to read the resolution or suspend the reading of the resolution since you all have it? Whatever is your pleasure, Madam Chair.
Maybe Erica just wants to display that up on the screen as well. And we could just take a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fay,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Lisa Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank
you.
you, Janet. I really appreciate the expansion.
It's important.
Next up, we have a report from our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, Kamal McCarthy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just going to give a quick update as to what's been going on in the DEI office. I'll start off with acknowledging that this month we'll be celebrating Juneteenth. This is the first year that Massachusetts is officially recognizing Juneteenth. I would leave Town Manager Gibson to explain how it will impact on offices if she hasn't already done so. But I'm just going to give a very brief history with the caveat of knowing that I'm not a historian. So in 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and shared a list of general orders. General Order number 3 informed the enslaved people that they were free, and this was 2 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth, I think most people already know, but I'll still say that it's a combination of the words June and 19th. And it has been observed by Americans to celebrate freedom for all since 1865. Texas was technically the first state to recognize Juneteenth in 1979. And it was first mentioned in the Athenaeum's historic digital newspaper archive back in 1995. I think it's important to note that the Friends of the African Meeting House held a Juneteenth celebration to restore the Meeting House in 1997. And this year, we will be doing a celebration with the DEI office, Nantucket Equity Advocates, and the Museum of African American History. And there will also be a brief write-up on the DEI webpage. Moving on to something else, the request for proposal to create a DEI strategic plan. So May 20th was the deadline for consultants to submit proposals to create a strategic plan. The town received 2 applications from firms that are located in New York. A proposal review committee is being convened, and we will have our first meeting next week. Just so everyone knows, the committee is made up of 7 individuals, 5 females, 2 males, which includes 2 Black and 1 Latinx participants and 2 community members, and the others are required town officials. Just as a reminder for everyone here, just of some of the scope that was a part of the RFP, it includes assessing the town's practice and procedures using a DEI lens on things such as hiring, communication, and professional development. It includes developing a Nantucket focused DEI manual, which I could really use. And it also includes creating a training plan for town employees. And we made sure to include at the very last minute to provide recommendations and an implementation for a diversity advisory board, which was a part of the select board, which was the select board idea, which dates back to the June 24th pledge to the Nantucket community of last year. Just 2 more things to go over really quickly, 3 more things actually. Wow, my list is longer than I thought it was. Tracking DEI. So there's no formula for how to measure DEI impact. Hopefully that will be a part of the RFP that I just discussed. But we have been doing, I have been doing some tracking myself with different categories such as the DEI inbox, which includes just things that come across my desk for requests for input, such as environmental justice or having participated in conversations on vaccine equity. There is another category that we've listed called DEI investments, which includes the RFP, the creation of this position, and webinars that we have paid for me to attend. And other categories includes inquiries, investigations, and collaborations. I would like to share with everyone that I've been doing a very unofficial PowerPoint presentation on the DEI office and its purposes. It's been presented to the Community Foundation for Nantucket and the Rotary Club. Next week, it will be presented to the Visitor Services Advisory Committee. And I'll just take this opportunity now to invite any local organization or select board members that would like me to share it with them to do so at a time that's convenient for all of us. And then the last thing that I'll share is that just recently we've launched a Lunch and Learn series, which is going to be specifically for the department heads on the book Micro Messaging by Stephen Young. I think many of us had attended that presentation that he did a while back, and this will be with department heads just to actually do a deep dive into what Stephen Young shared with everyone. This is going to start in June and end at the end of August. And depending on the success of the series, then we will offer it to town employees in the fall and winter of this year. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Sounds like we're off to a great start with your new position and developing protocols for the town. Anybody?
So.
Christy has a question or a comment.
Thank you. And Kamal, yes, you're doing an amazing job getting this department started, and I'm really excited to hear everything you're working on. One of the things you mentioned was training for town staff as part of the RFP. And I'm wondering if there's anything for boards and commissions or any trainings that we could put forward for the volunteers that help the town.
That's a great question. It is in the RFP that boards and committees will be included as well as just general opportunities for the community at large. I just kept the scope to 3 things that I thought were important. so it is included.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exciting.
Melissa?
Thanks, Dawn. Kamal, one thing that is important to me, maybe ongoing and outside of the scope of the RFP, is when this board is evaluating new policy recommendations, that we have you look at them and give us recommendations through a DEI lens. Is that something that you and or Libby have talked about doing going forward? Certainly not necessarily retroactively, but it seems important to me that we need to have any new policy looked at through a DEI lens.
Yes, the ones that Libby has thought are important for me to see for recently, the I believe it's called the vacancy bank, or for committee appointments. That was definitely something that came across my desk back in May. So that's certainly on my list of things to do.
Great. Fabulous. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Look forward to
pleasure. Thanks for having
me. Next up, we have a sewer department request for a waiver of the town noise bylaw. It's David Gray with us.
Sorry, Don, I had to unmute myself there. We're looking to get a nose waiver to be able to do night work to replace. We have a whole bunch. We have 42 manholes ultimately we want to replace, but we want to take and get a start on some of the ones that have large potholes around them, and mostly within the court. But we do have a couple of things out in Wisconsin as well. It'll be from 8 o'clock at night till I think I had put down 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't have it with me. I'm just leaving York Street. But just so we can do work to not interrupt the traffic flow.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, motions?
It's Matt. I move approval. And I'm glad to see David wasn't washed away by a broken pipe or anything. It's good to see you here, David.
And no, last week was an unusual.
I expect to see you on top of that thing.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
On Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Next up, we have now the applicant introductions and review of applications. There's a number of people on here. I am going to go through these are the names that were all announced last week, and whoever is present and wishes to speak when I call your committee, commission, and your name, please raise your hand. We'll recognize you, and then the board might have some questions. So first up, we have the Agricultural Commission. This commission has 5 seats available, and we have 1 applicant, Posey Constable. I see that you are here. Hopefully some more people will apply, so you actually have a quorum. But if you'd like to say anything, now is your chance.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm sorry there's not more interest in agriculture on our island, because Lord knows we need more locally grown food. But first off, I did first join a board through the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee as a seasonal appointee, I think 2 years ago, and I should resign that because I'm now a full-time resident. I have been a 25-year seasonal resident on Nantucket, but became a year-round full-time resident as of March 13 last year. Timing's everything. I took the job as managing director of Sustainable Nantucket to start April 1, but as soon as I got here, I started because it was COVID and what else was one to do. It's just to give everybody a sense of what I have learned in this year of Annus Horribilis. I've managed through COVID. We've developed a robust farmers market under the strict COVID rules. We've constructed a farm stand education center out at our Community Farm Institute at 168 Hummock Pond Road. And it's increased access of locally grown food to Nantucket residents and visitors. We're very grateful to town committees, the Community Preservation Committee, and the Land Bank for helping us to increase our agricultural footprint and advance our mission to provide more locally grown food to the town. We manage an 8-acre farm with 5 full-time farmers who, earn their living out there on the former Mount Vernon farm. They sell at the farmers market, in the farm stand, to retail outlets, to clubs, event planners, and to restaurants. And we manage the farm to school program that educates children from Nantucket Public Schools, Nantucket Community School, the Boys and Girls Clubs, and works to increase local food in the Nantucket Public Schools food service area. We hope to collaborate and provide resources to all local farms and the shellfish and fishery practitioners, and to expand local food for islanders. And if approved for the Agricultural Commission, I want to convene all the parties to agriculture and food production, and to increase the food grown on island year round, with less reliance on importing food from the mainland. I'd like to improve the amount of local and healthy food available to those in need on island in conjunction with other not-for-profits. So while I'm not, a farmer by trade, I am a finance person for many years in New York, and I'm an island girl because I grew up in Hawaii, but I'm passionate about the local food movement and making it available to anybody who needs it and wants it on this island. So I hope my application will be approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board members have any questions, just raise your hand as we go through. Next up, we have the Airport Commission. We have 2 seats available and 3 applicants. Ray, I don't know how to pronounce your last name properly. I don't want to butcher it, but it is Kairawicz. And then we have Philip Marks III and Andrea Planzer. I see Phil. Did you want to make a comment, Phil?
Sure. I'll just give you a little, if anyone doesn't know who I am, lived here my entire life, and operate a couple businesses, which happen to be on airport property. So I'm a tenant of the airport. I'm also a pilot, so I think I checked that box as far as the commission requiring people that are in the aviation as well. I think I have a lot to offer business-wise, and being a pilot to the commission, and I hope you guys accept my application. And thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you, Phil. And Ray, I saw you turn on your camera. Did you want to make a few comments? And please pronounce your name for me.
Hurwitz.
Hurwitz. Okay, thank you.
I apologize, but I've been living with that for 67 years, and I finally can spell it. Yes, I'm also a pilot like Phil, and I've been a tenant at the airport for 30 years. And I've seen a lot of the evolution of the airport, and it's constantly evolving, which is refreshing because I do travel quite a bit through New England and up and down the East Coast, in and out of a lot of airports. And Nantucket has done an excellent job. There's been a big shift in a lot of heavy hardware on the airport now, and general aviation has seemed to have gone a little bit on the wayside. And we really need to encourage younger people to get involved in general aviation. Otherwise, our airport's going to end up just with all jets and commercial flights. So yeah, I feel honored to be able to participate. I have participated in some of the airport commission meetings over the years, but it doesn't have nearly as much effect if you're a member of the commission, other than sitting in the audience. So yeah, thanks for giving me the time, and hopefully I look forward to being on the commission. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ray. I don't see Andrea on here. If the board members don't have any questions, I'm going to go to the Board of Health. We have one seat available and 2 applicants. I see that Ann Smith is here and James Cooper is the other applicant, but I don't see him on here. Ann, did you want to speak?
Sure. I'm Ann Smith. I have been a lifelong seasonal resident. I won't tell you how long that is, but it started when I was 6 months old, so it's a very long time. And I've been a year-round resident now for about 5 years. Professionally, I am a nurse practitioner, a women's health nurse practitioner, and a nurse midwife. And I have, in recent years, become more and more involved in mental health, and I serve on the board of Fairwinds here. I am the president of an organization known as Postpartum Support International, which is the primary women's mental health and postpartum depression organization. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and it is very clear that one of the purposes of the Board of Health on Nantucket is to provide for the health, I think, of all Nantucketers in all ways, their physical health, their mental health, and their public health and everything like that. So I've also this past year been very involved with the St. Paul's meal program. And through providing meals and driving the meals, I have to say that I've had my eyes opened to a lot of public health issues when we arrived with the meals and things like that. So I am really passionate about this, and I would be very honored to be selected to serve on the Board of Health. And I would love to answer any questions that anyone might have.
I'm not seeing any questions for you right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I should also note that if anyone misses tonight, they will have an opportunity to speak when we do the second round next week, or if anyone wants to make an additional comment, that's available. Capital Program Committee. We have Peter Kaiser is the incumbent who has reapplied for the one available seat. I don't see Peter on here tonight. Cemetery Commission, we have 2 seats available, two applicants, both incumbents, Francis Kartunen and Lee Saperstein. I see Fran. How are you?
I'm fine. I served out the rest of Bob Gardner's term on the Cemetery Commission, and I've since served 1 term, and I'm hoping to be reappointed for another full term. The Nantucket Cemetery Commission is responsible for 9 cemeteries. That does not include Prospect Hill or St. Mary's, for instance. And of the 9 town cemeteries, there's only space for new burials in 1, in Pulpus. So one of our jobs is selling lots and approving interments there. And we're rapidly selling out all the lots there. There's a piece of land adjacent to Newtown Cemetery that was supposed to be added to the cemetery, and we're working to finalize that. And that may provide room for a few full body burials, because at Pulpus it's only for cremation remains. The other things we do are maintain and improve the cemeteries, look after them, and lately we've been planting donated daffodil bulbs to make the cemeteries look better. You may have noticed the Newtown Cemetery entrance was graced with a lot of daffodils, and so was the historic colored cemetery facing the new hospital. So those are the things that we've been working on, some of them, and I would very much like to continue working on those projects for another term. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, and I didn't see Lee here this evening. Next up, we have the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. There's 1 seat available, and Joanna Roach has applied. Oh, there's Joanna. Oh, you're muted still.
Hi, thank you. I am interested in doing this because for the past 3 years, I've been running an organization that is focused on sustainability education for hospitality and wellness. And we have a lot of those businesses on island. And I think that some of the things I've learned in terms of creating standards and creating consensus amongst those groups would be helpful in this regard. As you all know, I've been a volunteer for the town of Nantucket for the past 6 years, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think that this is something that I'm passionate about. I've just come from the Envision Resilience presentation this afternoon, which I thought was fascinating. And I hope that I could offer a different perspective. So thank you for considering, and I appreciate it.
Very much. Not seeing any questions from the board. Thank you. Next up, we have the Conservation Commission. We have 2 seats available and 7 applicants. Ian Golding, William Cohen, Linda Williams, Joseph Plandowski, Neil Foley, David Golden, and Marcia Brown.
And I think you have almost all of them on.
Okay, let me see who is, Joseph Plandowski, you're up first.
Yes.
On my
Thank you. I've been coming to Nantucket for 40 years, moved here full-time 2 years ago. Have a background in engineering, a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's in business administration. And I think that experience can come in handy with the Sconset Geotube project, and also with global warming and whatever technology that's going to bring in order to stop some of the flooding that apparently will occur as the sea levels rise. That's it.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions? Or should we run through and then see if there are questions at the end? Okay. Neil Foley.
Hello, thank you for hearing me out. I am a recent acquisition to the island. I came here in 2014 to serve as the CO2 ranger. I spent 6 years in that position, protecting and appreciating the wetlands of Nantucket, the organisms that live there. I got my master's degree in conservation biology, studying the ecology of the island, the birds that live out in Coatue, how they interact with each other, and the flora and fauna. So now as a year-round resident, as an ecologist and educator, I'm furthering my understanding of the flora and fauna of Nantucket, the ecosystem services that they provide, and the threats that they face from multiple angles. So I am prepared to serve on this commission and give back to this community and provide objective, ecologically sound recommendations when necessary.
Thank you, Neil. Ian Golding. Good evening.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've served for 9 years, and I'm putting my name forward for a fourth term, in part because I would like to complete the work that we've been doing on updating our local regulations. I would like to continue to be part of the dialogue on sea level rise, and specifically the issues brought about by Chapter 91 that CZM and DEP are dealing with, and that we're dealing with on the North Shore in particular. I'm a member of I'm the CONCOM's representative to the CRAC, Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. And I'd like to continue to have some input into the coastal resiliency plan that the island is developing. I don't represent any special interests, and but you know, and one high visibility issue in particular that we're facing, I would hope that I'd be part of the constructive discussion that would allow a compromise that would take everything into account. So thank you, Madam Chair. I would be honored to be reappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. David Golden, I see you next. Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board. Thank you, fellow participants this evening. I'm David Golden. I've been a longtime summer resident. Although a California resident in the real world, I've been coming to Nantucket since 1987 every summer, and have been a homeowner since 2000. My wife and I have raised our children on the island in the summers as well. As a longtime Nantucket resident, I'm obviously greatly appreciative of the rare space Nantucket exists in our world in so many ways, and the challenges it faces with the increasing demands of climate change and the pressure that's being put on the island. I viewed participation on the commission really as a way to give back. I'll let the four corners of my application speak for itself, but happy to answer questions at the end if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Williams, I see you next. Good evening.
Good evening. Seems like we've been here 2 other times before this on this particular appointment. I think my participation in town government over the last 38 years is pretty well known, and my submission sort of states that. I have the time commitment. I know there's been some question about how busy I am and my time commitment abilities and conflicts of interest. We'll just go right to those. I don't really have conflicts of interest with the CONCOM. Most of my work is scheduled with the HDC, at times the planning board, rarely with the ZBA. I wouldn't have any more commitments. Conflicts of interest than anyone else on any of the other boards. I'm not a real estate person. So that wouldn't be an issue like it is on the ZBA or the planning board. If something should arise, obviously I would have to recuse, as Joe Topham would, or Dave, or anybody else on the CONCOM or any other board. Time commitments. Mercifully, the Government Study Committee is coming to an end shortly. Thank God. And we're working on our final report tomorrow, so that will end. And I'm going to get off. I'm going to withdraw my name when it comes up for the Council on Aging. I've enjoyed it very much, but Nancy Swain has applied, and I think that is a wonderful replacement. So that's going away. I rely on really good staff at the Housing Authority and other things that I'm on because it will just keep our act together and tell us what to do when we show up. Clearly, I'm still interested. I applied 3 times in the past over a year and a half now. I am not beholden to anybody. I'm not on any private nonprofit 501c3. I have no allegiance to anyone. I don't live on the Sconset Bluff. I live in the Badlands, which really has no allegiance to anyone except the sewer beds. And I feel like I have a lot to answer. I have a lot to offer. I know Robert's rules. I'm sort of ridiculously attached to the Robert's rules, open meeting laws. I work with the zoning bylaw, subdivision control laws quite often, so I'm well familiar with how to work with the state laws and the local laws. I do agree with Ian that updating the local I think that's pretty much it. I'm still interested. I still feel like I have something to offer. I have less other commitments now, and when it comes up, I support Nancy Swain's on the Council on Aging.
Sorry, I just wanted to note that there are actually 4 seats on the Council on Aging, not 3. There was a vacancy that I failed to note in your original committee applicant sheet. So
I'll stay on then because I just want Nancy Swain to come on. That's great. I'll withdraw my withdrawal, but it's a once a month. It's a very good group of people, a very completely dedicated group of people to furthering elder services.
I'll recognize you to speak to that one when we get there. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Marcia Brown is next. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself briefly. As I'm Marcia Brown, I'm a resident of Nantucket. And as you might know from my application, my career path has been in the medical field. I'm a physician and oncologist at Mass General Hospital, and I'm on the faculty at Harvard Medical School. And one of the most actually rewarding and wonderful opportunities in my career has been here in Nantucket, where I had the privilege to care for and to work with many island residents during my years as a member of the medical staff at Nantucket Cottage Hospital, where I worked in their oncology clinic in a mutual program with Mass General. I learned a lot from my patients about what it's like to live on the island, what issues there are and how those can affect patients and their families, and also what they value about living here. And I think every single patient mentioned the outdoor space. I would like to work on this committee because firstly, I have a lifelong interest and commitment to the environment and to conservation. And secondly, I would like to try to help preserve these beautiful open spaces that add such quality of life to the residents of the island. I do not have experience in a leadership or administrative way in the conservation field, but I have a science background. I believe a scientific approach that is looking at a complex problem from many perspectives, gathering information, facts, and input from many can be applied to problems as diverse and complex as cancer or conservation. I think it's especially important here in Nantucket to look for and find solutions to our conservation issues going forward that work for the whole island. So thank you for the opportunity. I am able to commit the time for meetings and to become an engaged member of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see that William Cohen is with us. There you are. Good evening.
Yes, here I am. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts. It would be an honor to serve on the CONCOM it's a organization that I've followed closely for many years. I've been coming to Nantucket my complete adult life, about 40 years. I've been a homeowner on Baxter Road since 2009. For better or for worse, I have a front row seat on the erosion on the bluff. I've learned a lot about nor'easters and the wind and the rain and what we've been trying to do and others out there have been trying to do to preserve the bluff. I've written, I was a longtime banker on Wall Street, turned full-time writer. I've written about erosion on Nantucket for Vanity Fair in 3 or 4 different pieces for the magazine. I care about the issue deeply and not just about the bluff and Sconset, but erosion as it affects the whole island. I've written about this, you know, how it affects Hummock Pond Road and in Nantucket and Matacasham and all over the island. And I would look forward greatly to being part of the CONCOM to solve the ongoing roadblock that has prevented over the years any forward progress on what is not just an issue affecting Sconset, but is an issue affecting the entire island. And I would look forward to participating in being part of the solution and not being part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions? Okay. Next up, we have the contract review subcommittee of Human Services. 1 seat, 1 applicant, John Balash. The incumbent has applied. I don't see John on. Council for Human Services. We have 2 seats available and 1 applicant.
John's here and he's unmuted. He was waving at you.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's just so many names on the screen. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am familiar. I think I'm known to most of you, and I have reapplied because I've been on this contract review committee for about 10 years. I moved to Nantucket in 2002, and I have a strong commitment to the purposes of this contract review committee. And over the years, I think our committee and my participation in it has helped move the nonprofit organizations which benefit from the town's contribution of monies to greater cooperation with each other and a more effective use, therefore, of the town's money. And I want to pursue that as long as I can.
Thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. Thank you for coming. Next up, we have the Council for Human Services. 2 seats available and 1 applicant. Is Sue Mitten with us?
I'm here, yes.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Sue.
Thanks. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself, although I do know some people that are on the Select Board now. My interest in this council runs quite parallel to my personal and career activities. I try to make a difference with my work in the community. Since moving to Nantucket nearly 8 years ago, I've been involved professionally with A Safe Place, the Nantucket Community School, and the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention, which is now part of NAMI on Nantucket. Also the Behavioral Health Advisory Group and the Healthy Community Collaborative, and also the UU Meeting House. My personal interests have brought me to organize an awareness campaign for Women's History Month, as well as an Inauguration Day parade this year. And I'm a member of We Can, and currently the sole representative of the islands on the Cape Cod and Islands Commission on the Status of Women. I have the opportunity to meet with and work with colleagues across human services sector every day, and I listen closely to what the needs are when I talk to my colleagues and the community members we meet in our service. And I hope to bring these concerns and ideas and hopefully solutions to the council. I'm eager to do more listening and creative problem solving in service of Nantucket, and hope you will feel confident appointing me to the Council on Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I don't see any questions. Thanks again. Council on Aging. And as we know, there was an error here. There are 4 seats available and 4 applicants. Vanessa Larrabee, Judith Perkins, Nancy Swain, and Linda Williams. Linda, you're up now. And then I see Vanessa.
And I saw Nancy Swain here earlier.
Yes, they've got 2 screens, so I'll look through.
I've been here a long time, 48 years year round. And as we're all getting older, everybody I grew up with is getting older, and we all qualify to go to the Salt Marsh Center. And so we've become more aware of the need for elder support services, whether it's Meals on Wheels or whether it's our activities that we have at the Salt Marsh. And I volunteer at the Salt Marsh as well for certain things. It's a really good group. It's a very dynamic group. I'd like to stay on, but I wasn't going to stay on in place of Nancy Swain because I think she'd bring a lot to the Council on Aging. So I'll stay on if there is an extra spot. But that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I'm getting older and I'll be a member.
Thank you. Vanessa Larrabee.
Hi, Vanessa Larrabee. Coming back for hopefully my second term, actually, I should say, on Council of Aging. I'm the Financial and Resident Services Director at Sherburne Commons. I am the youngest person that sits on the board. And I feel like I haven't learned enough from, my others, who also sit on the board. I feel like the voice of, a 40-something isn't really heard just because I'm not, quote unquote, a senior yet. However, it will be, my generation that actually helps, others. And I feel like my work isn't really, my volunteer, my ideas aren't really done yet. Sherburne Commons is a great place. The Salt Marsh, the Landmark House, everything just needs just a little bit more help. And I just feel like my age would definitely do more. But like I said, I really need to learn more from the others who sit on the board.
Thank you. I don't see Nancy on here now, and I don't see Judith Perkins. But again, they have the opportunity to speak next week if they'd like to.
Nancy's on.
Oh, she is. Oh, there she is. Sorry. Nancy, can you hear? Go ahead.
Hold on, we're just getting her to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, Linda, thank you so much, but I never would have applied for a seat. Besides the 3 of you being there, I didn't want to move anybody off because your board is really doing a tremendous job. So I never would have applied for a position if there were not a seat available. But to give you some background, I was hired by the Salt Marsh Center in 1998 as an aerobic instructor. I took a seat just for a short amount of time on NCOA toward the latter part of 1990. In 2015, I accepted the position of the president of NCEA, which is the fundraising portion for the Salt Marsh Center. I would just like to let everybody know that I want to remain informed with all the Salt Marsh's involvement in senior activities, and that way we can disperse the information that we can to the public And also, I'm trying to see what the your goals are here. Inform the community and enlist the support and participation of all the seniors. We have got at least 3 senior centers right now that could use some help. So I think kind of outreaching the different seniors and doing something with them, the healthy ones, to help out the ones who aren't quite so healthy would be, a good plan for the future. But right now, keep up the good work. Congratulations to the NCA board, all of you folks, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Nancy. Are there any questions from the board? Next up, we have the Cultural Council. There are three seats available on the Cultural Council and 1 applicant, Tony Wagner. Is Tony with us?
I am, in fact. Thanks for having me over tonight. Yeah, a quick introduction for me. I am a resident of the island. In fact, there's some thumping behind me. Apologies for that. I have a front row seat to the Surfside project right now. In fact, I'd like a field report. Happy to give it. I currently serve as the executive director of the Nantucket Community Music Center, deep in the cultural district. I was thrilled to see Janet's report that the potential expansion of the cultural district. My decision to apply for a seat on the Cultural Council is due primarily to my passion for promoting partnership between cultural organizations. I have a firm belief that partnerships that cross artistic boundaries, musicians with artists, artists with theater, theater with writers, is the way to build a stronger community. And so I believe that I have a role to play in the council, and I look forward to being on it if I am appointed. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions? Okay. Next up, we have the Finance Committee. We have 3 seats available, 3 applicants, all incumbents: Peter Schaefer, George Harrington, and Peter McEachern. I know I saw Peter Schaefer and George Harrington were here. Peter Schaefer? You're muted.
Thank you. I've been on the Finance Committee now for 3 years. I really believe it takes 2 years being on the committee to really understand what you're doing there and what our role is. And, my background is I spent 20 years as an investment banker. I spent 20 years in retailing. I was the senior vice president of Bloomingdale's. I ran the New York store. My family is very involved in the island. My son's on the board of the Boys Club. My wife works at the NHA. I'm a firm believer in contrasting opinions. Sometimes we'll challenge things just so we understand where we're coming from. And it's not just a role play where we're just being, yes people. I think that especially on the Finance Committee, we have a lot of opportunity to impact or potentially impact decisions that are made by the community. And I find that, really good, and I enjoy it. So I hope I get reappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. George Harrington?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I've been on this committee now for almost 2 years, and as Peter says, it takes a long while to really get an understanding. On the other hand, I've lived here for more than 50 years, worked in a number of areas in the economy, and have a pretty good appreciation of what people work with on a day-to-day basis. I've got a bachelor's degree that is in industrial management, which is half management and accounting, and the other half is engineering. I've enjoyed everything about the last 51 years living here. My children have all gone through the schools, and I feel very comfortable speaking with virtually any town employee and any person who comes to me on any matter about the finances. So thank you for my opportunity to present this.
Thank you, George. I don't think Peter McEachern's on here.
I don't think so.
Okay. Anyone who didn't speak tonight who wants to is welcome to come next week when we do the next round. And anyone from the public who wishes to make comments to us in regard to the appointment process and any of the applications is welcome to send in emails. Erica, did you have a comment? And Melissa? Melissa has her hand up.
I do not.
I just wanted to thank all of tonight's applicants for showing up and speaking a little bit about yourself and your interest in the committees. I know it takes extra time and some patience to wait through the meeting, but it really does help us through the process. And thank you for your commitment and service to Nantucket, regardless of the outcome of the votes. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. And just a reminder to everyone, the appointments will be made on June 23rd. They'll all be made at once. And yes, always appreciate everyone's willingness to volunteer. And again, there are additional open seats if people want to apply for the next round of openings. Next up, we have Town Government Study Committee report.
I'm sorry, you have a hand raised.
Oh, I do. Sorry. I have too many screens tonight.
It's Mary Worrell.
Oh, yes, Mary.
Hello.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Now you're clear.
Hello.
Yep, you're clear now. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. I just have a procedural question. My understanding is from what you just said that members of the public who have questions can send them by email to the select board. And I note that there were no questions from the members of the select board to any of the candidates, which was a little surprising. And there were a number of questions with respect to the process that were posed last week that you alluded to and indicated they were quite valid questions. If members of the public have questions that they wish to be addressed to applicants in general or to specific applicants, how would it be that the members of the board would accommodate that concern? Would the board members ask those questions of the applicants? Would the applicants be requested to return and answer the questions? I'm just not clear from what your adopted policy provides as to how that occurs. And had there been questions to the applicants from members of the select board, and I think there are many very simple questions that come to mind immediately that the board members themselves have discussed that were not posed to the applicants. You know, how is that going to happen?
Matt?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to Mary, but I just want to comment. I think it's difficult in this format, Mary, for at least for me, and with the time constraints that we're under, to ask detailed and multiple questions. I think, I understand the intent of the rector rule, which is what I'm calling this. I think this is an offshoot of that. I think the intent was to get more of that to happen, but I'm not sure it's actually done that. I think what we're attempting to do is a work in progress at this point. I don't know how we're going to directly answer that, but I will say one thing I think we have to be careful of is, allowing people to target each other. I think, we have to make sure that we aren't driving for a result one way or the other, especially on some of these more contentious appointments potentially. And so I think you make a very good point, Mary, but I'm not sure the answer myself yet. So.
May I respond to that?
Yes, briefly.
I will try to be very brief. My major concern is certainly not to target people, but to try to assess whether people understand what the responsibilities are of some of these committees and what the limitations are. For example, with the Conservation Commission, if a new member has not participated in an open hearing, which is an ongoing hearing, that person is not permitted to participate in the remaining portions of the hearing and to have a vote. And I'm wondering if people are aware of that. I'm wondering if people are aware of the time commitments, particularly with the Conservation Commission, that it's not only, twice a month of meetings, it's also site visits, which require people to go out in the middle of the winter to visit sites. And having done that myself on a number of occasions, and having been one of the oldest people who was trekking around Nantucket at that time, it was a very sobering experience, and one I enjoyed. But it was something that was required, and people need to have the time and willingness to do that. So I won't go on, but there are a number of other questions like that I think really that the board needs to be assured that people who do these, who make these voluntary applications, it is a tremendous amount of work that is required of people. So that's all I really have to say. And thank you, Matt. I do understand you don't want to, there aren't worlds enough or time to go through all the things that one might want to do.
Christy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add that we have applications for all the applicants that are in our public packet, and those answer a lot of questions like, do you understand the time commitment? Have you attended a meeting in the past? Why do you want to be on the board? So a lot of the questions that I have for applicants are answered in that application, and I took the time to read those prior to this meeting. And then also hearing from the applicants today really showed us kind of why people are interested in different positions. And so I think that some of those questions that you brought up are really good questions, but they are answered in our application, and is why I personally didn't re-ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Joanna Roach?
Thanks. I just want to say, since I participated in this conversation a few weeks ago, I would really like us to come from the place where we are assuming that people are adults and they understand what they're volunteering for, and that this is a commitment and they've come forward to support the town of Nantucket, and that it's a positive thing, right? And that I appreciate all of your time and considering all of our comments and our availability to you and our desire to serve. And I think that that's enough. So thank you.
Linda Williams?
I have a feeling that some of those questions were going to be directed at me in particular, given what happened last week and what happened last year. I know that the selectmen take a lot of time and look at all the applications and listen to what everybody has to say. And I've been in town government for 38 years. And selectmen have always tried to do their best and due diligence. And having been through this and looking at the list from this week and next week, that is a lot of people and a lot of positions that have to be filled. If they allowed a free-for-all on asking questions to any one of us, particularly ones that are more controversial and targeted, we have to call it what it is, that could bog down the selectmen. It could cause a nightmare in general and be unfair to other applicants who didn't get that kind of response time. So I think you've done a good job. I respect the amount of time that you put into this and the way you have to read every one of them, like Christy said. And I think your process was adjusted from last year, and we have to live with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I was just noting that members of the public are always welcome to give their input to us in writing in regard to the appointment process. And if there were questions for this evening, they could have emailed any board members prior, and the board members could have chosen to ask questions or not. I agree with what Christy said, that there is a lot of detail in the applications, and people's presenting of themselves was quite thorough tonight. And I think that we're going to move on at this point to the next agenda item. But Erica, I'll go to you before I do that.
Sorry, I don't mean to make this go on, but that is exactly why we added the extra week for all the names and all the applications to be in the packet. So now it's been in for 2 weeks and we've received 0 public comment.
Thank you, Erica. John Brescher, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's nice to see all of your smiling faces again. It's been a while since we've done this with the Town Government Study Committee, but we are starting to wrap things up with a rapid clip, so to speak. We had one of our wrapping up meetings this morning, and we were sort of discussing the best way to give you an update. And I think, unless I hear any objections from the select board, it will be to quickly highlight the topics that were on our memorandum to the select board back in November of 2020, and discuss what has changed and what we will be sort of presenting at town meeting. And if you have any questions and need any feel like interrupting me, by all means, please feel free to do so. So assuming that's, so we've met for about 3.5 years. We've had over 70 meetings, and it looks like we've found a number of topics that we're going to look at and discuss, and sort of make recommendations on. And the recommendations will be in our report that we will have available online. I'm not sure how many hard copies we'll have at town meeting, because it's probably going to be roughly 40 pages with the various addendums. The first one was the basic form of government in Nantucket. I know we had talked about this because this was the most sort of exciting, largest topic to talk about back in November. And sorry, speaker issues. And so basically what we've come to as a committee was a recommendation that we're going to recommend that the charter, let's see, not so much the charter, that the town of Nantucket establish a special commission with the sole purpose of investigating the form of town government and town meeting in Nantucket. And we all voted in favor of it, and we determined that it was such an important topic that we really needed to sort of take our time with it, so to speak. The next item was the organization of local government, and let's see, we suggested that recommend that the charter be amended so that that there be a sort of an annual presentation of a flow chart for the commission by town administration or the select board for the public, so they understand sort of the mechanics and inner workings of how the government is organized. Don't mind the toddlers. Then we had code enforcement. We talked about having not necessarily amending the charter, but sort of changing or making a recommendation that we have a that there be a sort of an annual report of all the code enforcement actions that the town has taken over the course of the year. We know it's a daunting task, so we didn't think it was prudent to put it in the charter at all. We talked about sort of revising the audit committee. We had a citizen warrant article, I think, last year, and that was passed, so that's fine. We're going to recommend sort of having a more thorough review of the HDC charter. And sort of the other two, these two sort of go hand in hand. Amending the charter to sort of request and require that there be a separate licensing commission and a parking commission. We heard enough comments about that this is a good idea, and we think it makes sense to have these commissions established. Let's see, another two were actually the sewer commission and a sewer abatement committee. The SOAR Commission, we suggested that be further studied because we're all nervous of the unintended consequences of creating a SOAR Commission, and we didn't want to go into it without really looking through all of the potential ramifications of creating this commission. As for the SOAR Abatement Committee, we think that would be a good idea. I mean, that SOAR is coming. If it's not here, it's coming. And the more people will be sort of requesting either waivers or into the loan program, and it just makes sense to have a special abatement committee so it's not in front of the select board constantly. We talked about the airport warrant article. That was, we recommended that, and that was passed last year. We have spent a lot of time on Parks and Rec, a lot of time on Parks and Rec. And ultimately, the committee looked through as much as we could, and we're effectively recommending that the department be reinstituted as a separate entity, and that the appointment authority to the commission go to the select board. We have more sort of dicta in the report about how we came to this, but it was a very passionate topic for a lot of the committee members. We talked about there was talk for a few years of creating a town ombudsman to settle any disputes, and we couldn't wrap our heads around it, or more to the point, I should say, we just did not think it was a good idea. And we commented on a number of warrant articles and sent those to the town manager. As for the government study committee itself, we were going to suggest, since the committee is per the terms of the charter that they report to town meeting, we're going to suggest having the moderator appoint the government study committee. We had a number of discussions about this. Other towns in the Commonwealth do it this way. And it's an interesting idea. And again, what we have are recommendations. There are no warrant articles, but it's sort of a blueprint for changes that we think may be worthwhile in the near future in terms of both amending the charter as well as sort of looking at the mechanics within town government. Town council was kind enough to send us the charter. Excuse me, they were kind enough to make comments and edits to the charter. We have sent, we reviewed those and made all sorts of comments on that. Let's see, another suggestion that we had was formally adopting a biannual town meeting instead of just having an annual. It seems like we have enough warrant articles, enough legislative activity to warrant 2 town meetings a year and just have it set up as a biannual town meeting. We also suggested modifying the number of signatures for a citizen's warrant article to increase this to 25 instead of 10. That had a lot of discussion within our committee as well. Let's see, we also talked about extending the moderator's term for 3 years instead of just 1 year. And sort of finally, not the big one, but another one that we talked about was suggesting that the activity of, or the representation for non-voting taxpayers be altered at town meeting. We had a lot of discussion today about it relative to increasing the number because only 1 is allowed as it is. And we had a lengthy discussion about whether this should be a fixed number or if it should just be open-ended. And so we're just sort of making the recommendation that we should either increase the number or delete the section entirely and let the moderator use the discretion for non-voting taxpayers to be able to speak. Again, what's interesting about all of this is that they are simply recommendations. They are not proposed as warrant articles, but they are recommendations for what we think could be developed into warrant articles or charter changes or just governance changes in the near future. Near future meaning realistically sort of town meeting of 2022. So that's in a very quick nutshell what we've been doing and what we have come up with. I realize it's a lot to digest. The final report is still being drafted, but we will have it for town meeting. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to ask me.
Melissa, then Christy.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, John. I know you all have been meeting, I think, is it 4 years now? Almost 4 years?
Who's counting?
Who's counting? So I just have a couple of questions on the recommendations. I obviously haven't seen the report, so I was just taking notes. And I guess one suggestion maybe for Don and Jason that we consider having a subsequent conversation on these recommendations at another select board meeting, because it sounds like there are some there that we may or may not want to take action on. But why, can you explain a little bit of the rationale of the moderator appointing the members of the town government study committee?
I can try. So the rationale for this was sort of had a number of reasons behind it. One was that trying to set up some autonomy of the committee itself. In other words, that we do, by our charge, we report to town meeting. And so we are beholden to town meeting. So as not to create, I don't know, I don't even want to say it, a conflict, but to sort of preserve that independence, it was suggested, well, hey, maybe the moderator should appoint this committee so that they're not at all, so the committee in the future is not at all influenced by any select board agenda. As a practical matter, we did note and comment that for any of these changes to really have any momentum or any support, it's going to need select board support. So it's a really interesting relationship between all of this that we're thinking about and seeing in terms of sort of protecting an independence and an autonomy of a committee, but also being pragmatic and realistic, saying, well, if there's going to be any success in adopting any of these recommendations, it's going to need to have support of the select board as well. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the impetus behind it. Again, I don't know if it's a palatable recommendation, but it's something that we weighed and considered, and that's what we came up with.
Okay. May I ask another question, Don? Okay. What was behind the decision to not put any articles or recommendations forward after 4 years? I'm sorry, you've got the recommendations in the report, but why not put any articles forward in terms of substantive change?
Timing.
Okay.
Pure timing. We didn't get any of the charter changes from town council until May 5th.
Okay. So, and I guess I don't know what the time frame is for a normal convening of a government study committee. I know that you've been meeting for 4 years, and I mean this with all due respect, because I know how hard you all have worked. I sat on the committee a little bit in the early days, but I guess I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have more concrete decisions to be made at this point after 4 years. What is your vision or your hope for the next convening of this committee?
Well, I can only speak as one member of the committee here, but my hope would be that they can take our blueprint and sort of move forward with it. There were a number of challenges in terms of, let's say, direction on this, in terms of what we were looking at smaller issues, looking at larger issues. And I don't know if it felt at times that there was a lot on the plate and trying to focus the scope of what we were looking at so that we had sort of tangible or realistic warrant articles.
Yeah.
That made it difficult given the timing of everything, especially in light of, I mean, it's silly to blame COVID, But we did have that in there, and the two town meetings, the 2020 and 2021 town meetings are a little, hopefully they're unique.
Yeah.
We're not
I
going to see
guess
the
yeah, and I guess my final comment would be, you know, and this may be more for my fellow board members, but I think every year, and particularly after the COVID year, we've heard about how our form of government is challenging for a lot of our community members. And I was really hopeful that we would have more concrete direction from this committee in terms of the pluses and minuses. And again, I haven't seen the report, so maybe we get that into some of the alternatives, but I really think this needs to be a priority that we undertake, whether it's appointing another special committee that focuses on our general governance and not get so granular that as this committee did. But I think there's a lot of community concerns about lack of being able to participate or representation, and that and the questions of have we outgrown this form of government. I look forward to reading the report, but I don't want to drop the momentum that you all set into motion to ask those difficult questions, because I think many members in our community are feeling underserved. Thank you.
Melissa, I think that Linda Williams, who's also on the committee, wanted to respond. She's got her, and then Christy, I'll go to you for your comment, if that's okay.
Those are good questions. We have actually talked about exactly what you've asked over time. We did have some scheduling issues, the pandemic issues. We couldn't meet for a while. We got stuck on a hot button issue, which is the form of government, which is what you're referring to about the lack of representation. Where our second night at town meeting is 250 people if you're lucky, and we couldn't pass the finance articles because we didn't have a quorum. And three of us went over to Falmouth and talked to them about their representative town government. So we did spend a lot of time with that. We held public hearings before the pandemic. And I believe the majority of the people that came were in favor of a representative town government because they felt like whoever the representative was, whether you're non-voting taxpayer or year-round person in that zone, they would be listened to and you could present those comments. So I fully agree with that type of thing, but we didn't want to make a concrete response to that or put a warrant article in based on that. Plus, we were leery about putting warrant articles in like the last group several years ago, that most of which got voted down. We wanted to make sure that we had a discussion with you after you read the report, and then we can talk about how to implement or what things that you and town moderator would see as viable to bring forth to a town meeting. And I understand there may be a special town meeting in the fall. So we didn't want to overstep, and we didn't want to be more aggressive with any warrant articles without running this whole thing through you guys first. Well, you mentioned governance. Oddly, we had, I forget if it was John or one of the other members, it might have been Curtis Barnes, who brought up some other towns have a standing committee called a governance committee, which then digests these things or fields complaints from the public and brings them to you. How can we implement them through administrative action or town meeting action? So that may be something that we can discuss with you at a future date as a standing committee that would address those things on a regular basis. That would sort of take care of that. Some of the stuff in here is interesting because we had a couple of members who would go off and look at other towns all over the state, in particular on the Cape, because they have similar demographics. And the town moderator appointing the government study committee was done in other towns. So we didn't invent the wheel on almost any of this stuff. So it was after a lot of, research and presentation among ourselves. And Christy was on the committee for a while as well. So she knows how difficult it was to get forward and how many times we asked for Lauren to look at the charter and get back to us. And only because Libby intervened and we just finally got an answer May 5th, not for dint of trying on Libby and Dawn's parts, for sure. But we finally got an answer. They were very small, minor changes. You'll see them when you see the report. We voted some in and others we didn't feel were right for Nantucket. So once you read the report, I think it'd be a good idea for us as a committee to post and then come back to reconvene to have a more in-depth discussion with you guys about some of the recommendations and see where you want to go from there. Where we felt it was more appropriate for the select board to put them in and not us at this time.
Thank you, Linda. Melissa, did you have a follow-up?
No, I just thank you very much for that, for John and Linda. And I do want to give thanks to the entire committee. I know it's been a long 4 years. There was a lot to digest and review, and perhaps at the next convening, however it's appointed, we can give more specific direction about what our expectation of the outcomes are, so that you can use this report as a blueprint. But thank you again for your service. I appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you, Melissa. Christy?
Thank you, Dawn. I just wanted to thank John and the committee. As Linda mentioned, I also served like Melissa on this committee for a short time before joining the select board. I think one of the challenges that I saw with this committee was a previous town government study committee hadn't been formed for, I think, 10 or 15 years. So a lot of time was spent reviewing kind of what they had laid out, which, as everybody knows, Nantucket has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. And there was a lot of recommendations that no longer applied or were relevant, and then a lot of new issues that have come forward. So it was a lot to kind of sort through and figure out what should be a priority. So thank you to John and the committee for sorting through all of that and giving us recommendations. I'm also wondering, like Melissa, how we move things forward. Is the final report going to be something that the board can discuss and put forward as warrant articles next year, or is this kind of a recommendation to the community in hopes that a citizen might put forward the articles? How will this be able to move forward?
I think it's probably a combination of both, which is why we didn't put any forward.
Go ahead.
But it's a combination of both. Without, we just didn't want to jump the gun if there's some controversial things in the charter, such as the form of government, form of town meeting. There's any number of ways of moving forward. Some are policy changes that you guys can make without having to go to a charter. It was hard to distinguish between charter changes and policy recommendations. So it really does require all of us to sort of meet and figure out who's going to do what and how.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that I think that we should review the report, and it's going to get presented to town meeting. And afterwards, I think that we should go through and invite the government study committee in and see if the select board wants to sponsor any articles for our next available town meeting. And then also other recommendations, if we choose not to take them up, could be taken up by other members of the community if they wish.
Oh, can I add one thing, Dawn? I just got a text from another member of the committee, and he wanted to make sure that you understood that some of it is dependent on the result of the census. So there's certain forms of government and certain types of things that can be done depending on the census.
When you reference a text message, I need to know who it's from.
Tucker. Okay. Tucker. And he just wanted to make sure you understood that some of it's dependent on the results of the census.
Yes, agreed. And we won't have that for a little while. Okay, so I think that we should add that to the silver sheet and figure out a date for sometime this summer to have another meeting. Christy?
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that I know previously, or it's in the charter that it's supposed to convene every 5 years. And I think it didn't previously because there wasn't enough interest. So I'm hoping that with our new committee appointment process and the new website that Erica and Valencia are putting forward, that we won't see a gap in this in the future, and that we'll just kind of see this continue to work year after year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board or any follow-up, John?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a long process, rewarding mostly. And yeah, I think I think the key phrase was momentum, or the key word is momentum. I think there is momentum moving forward in what we can and cannot do. And when you see the report, you'll see what makes sense, I think, what doesn't, and sort of can go from there. But it's cleaning up, and again, there's some good ideas, I think, and some that may not go anywhere, but we'll see.
No, thank you. Let's try and meet on it sooner than later, so that after we've digested the report,
sure,
while it's all still fresh in all of your minds, and we'll figure out when the best time is for that.
Great.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we are on to town managers reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing is an update on town project bids. We have recently put out to bid 3 projects, one specifically before town meeting, which is the Nobodere Fieldhouse. And over the past few months, we have been hearing information from our consultants and professionals that are helping, that are engineering and designing and developing the bids for these projects, that there has been a very recent rise in construction material costs, and we have seen that with these projects. Erica, can you get the PowerPoint up? Thank you. So I'm going to take you through the slides with Brian's assistance and the assistance of the department heads or the staff that are points of contact for these projects. So as you can see here, and thank you to Rick Sears for helping put this together as well, the assistant finance director. Input costs are rising, and you can just see here what some of these things are. Pre-pandemic price per foot of lumber, $440 in February 2020. Over $1,300 in May of 2021. Over 200% increase. Copper, another example. And it's not just those things, those are just examples. Next slide. So with respect to the Nobodere Fieldhouse, you can see what has happened here. We had 3 bids. They range from 2.358 million to 2.66 million. And the currently available funding is shown here. We have a project deficit with this project of $851,000. So we've been discussing the potential for what should we do here. We could propose a technical amendment for a larger request. So we do have an article on the warrant, Article 14, which seeks supplemental funding, or it's Article 14, right, Brian? Or
it is, yeah, that's a typo.
Right, okay. For $1 million supplemental funding, and there is also a ballot question. It's an override debt exclusion, actually, so it will require subsequent voter approval. So we could do that, or we could delay the project until building costs become more stable, potentially. We have discussed whether or not we could scale the design back, and what we're advised is this is the scaled back design. It's bare bones. So we wanted to run by the board what your all thoughts might be. And we know there is concern out there already at the cost of this project, never mind the bids that have come in, the estimated cost before the bids. Next slide, please. The Harbor Master Building is another issue. 2 bids ranging from 4.8 million to almost 6. We have almost a $2 million deficit with this project. We have about 3.1 million in funds available currently. And at this point, our recommendation would be to propose a supplemental appropriation at the next town meeting. It could potentially be a special town meeting, right, Brian, if we were to have one?
It could be. We would need a second debt exclusion vote that we would have to have at some point, though, because DOR will not let us tack this large of an increase onto the current debt exclusion vote we have.
Yep. So, and that I think we discussed the other day with town council could potentially be done at the next annual town election, the 2022.
Correct.
This is a problem project. The next project, there's actually a bit of good news. The bids for the F Street bulkhead came in within the appropriation, provided that we do get a supplemental funding request that is currently in the warrant for the 2021. Is that supposed to say 2021 annual town meeting?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, that's what it's down here where it says ATM 2022. That's actually supposed to say 2021. We do have a request on the warrant now, and if it's approved, we will be okay with this project. So we do have people here to answer any questions that the board might have, and we are seeking some direction with regard to the Nobodere Fieldhouse, because we've got to determine if we're going to be making a technical amendment or not.
Matt Fee?
Yeah, I think we should delay the first two and let the prices come down. I just, as much as I would like to see that, 2.6 million for a shed doesn't make any sense at all. Nor does 6 million for the, for the harbor master. It just, the numbers are just insane, and I can't, I for one can't support them as much as I want them.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hear what you're saying, Matt. I think I guess I have some questions for. I want to hear what the board has to say. Questions for Brian and Libby on if we do allow it to go to town meeting, we explain it on town meeting floor. It could be cheaper. The prices could go down next couple of years, but maybe not. Are we willing to wait 3 or 4 more years? What's the community want? What's the value to them? Like, it might be a value at 2.6 for them. It might not be for me and you, Matt, but I think I'm leaning on the side to take it to town meeting and explaining it and then voting that amendment. But I don't know if that's problematic at all. If it fails, are we back to the drawing board? Is there a disadvantage there some way, Brian or Libby?
Do you mean proceeding with nobody seeking the additional funding?
Yes, nobody here, sorry.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't really know how town meeting will react. We certainly could put forward I'm sorry.
No, we don't know how town meeting will react. If it fails, is it problematic? We have to wait for the next town meeting. Is it, what are we doing with the RFP? I know it's complicated and layered.
Oh, the bid's only good for, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so the bids would expire. They were timed to, especially with Nobody or Fieldhouse, it was timed to give us the ability, if we needed to open them and have the supplemental at the million that we had anticipated at town meeting. And if town meeting and the ballot approved it, then we would be able to award the contract. If the ballot or town meeting doesn't pass, then the bids would expire because we would not have the funding to be able to award the contract. So we would have to, at that point, we would start all over again with a new, either at a special or an annual town meeting. We'd go back through the bid process again and time it to the meeting so that we could award the contract, so that we were within that and not in a position of not being able to award if funding was available.
Christy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, I completely agree with you that it's very difficult to kind of swallow these price tags and want to move forward. I think one of my biggest concerns is with the Nobody or Fieldhouse. That was brought up a couple of town meetings ago about the status and wanting to see it move forward. And so I think there's, input from the community that they want to see this built and moving forward. So I think Jason's right in putting it forward and seeing, what the voters decide. If they think that that's too high of a price tag, then they'll reflect that in their vote. But I think at least putting that one forward at town meeting is what I'd be in favor of.
Matt?
And I understand that. I made a suggestion to Rob and Libby of doing a gazebo type thing there. Take the walls off, just do a gazebo, do bathrooms on the back of it, try to get it in under the numbers that we have. I think, as we have to set the parameters in some manner. And I think counting on town meeting. The other thing is I was involved with, building Delta Fields. There was a lot of donated time. The building out there was built by the Navy. It was donated. The community came together and did a lot of that. And that could happen again. People are allowed to donate to the town. They're allowed to set up something and do this. I think expecting the taxpayers to foot the bill, no matter what it is, some things are, have to haves and some things are nice to haves. I really, I'm, like I said, I helped build the Delta Fields and I was involved with that and I fundraised for a year and a half, 2 years. I think that, I just have a hard time, thinking it's going to pass the ballot, town meeting, or the ballot at these numbers. So.
I'm having major sticker shock as well. But I agree on Nobody or Field House that it is up to the voters. It's, kind of their decision on whether they want to spend that kind of money or send it back for a redesign. Maybe there are some opportunities. I do think that supply chain issues will get better, but that doesn't mean that labor is going down. It's probably going to go up and so forth. So there may not be any real overall reduction in these kind of prices. On the Harbor Master building, that one's not as simple. I don't know if there are any opportunities for redesign to save money and to go back to town meeting next year with the way we've done it, like with the fire station, where we had a definitive number right before town meeting that we took to town meeting as an option. I mean, there have also been some questions raised over time about the design of that building and whether there could be some more thought on sensitivity to resiliency and whether we want to look at any of those type of things. But we do have a few public comments, but I didn't want to cut short back and forth board discussion. Okay, Linda Williams has her hand up.
I'm sort of not speaking as a member of the public. I'm speaking as the vice chair of the Community Preservation Committee. And this has been my project. Those fields have been my project. The field house is my project. The CPC sunk over a couple of $1 million into those new fields. We also allocated a substantial amount of money for that field house many years ago. Money was appropriated out of that and put towards something else by a previous DPW superintendent. I don't know how much money is left, but Brian, through you, Madam Chairman, Brian, that shortfall of 8 million or 800,000 and change, does that include the money that was left in the CPC line item budget for that field house? Because I thought there was 150 grand or something left in that account. I haven't looked at it for a while.
Through you, Madam Chair, it doesn't include that because we are using that for some of the design costs and OPM costs, if I recall correctly. So it's net of that money because that money is being used for other pieces of this project.
Okay, because I have lost track because I have not signed anything and I haven't seen anything for quite a while. But I know it's come up at town meeting. Town meeting did vote a substantial amount of money for those fields in our CPC warrant articles many years ago, and they voted a substantial amount to the field house. And I'm getting a lot of pushback from a lot of quarters, various sports leagues, other CPC members. Dawn is on the CPC as your representative, about where is this field house? And I don't think waiting is going to be palatable to everybody that's been waiting for 5+ years for that field house. And we did have a much more aggrandized design for it in the first place. And this is the bare bones. There's no bells and whistles in here. There's no meeting space in the basement, et cetera, et cetera. So Matt has already cut back pretty far. Prevailing wage is impacting this because you have to bid it. The costs of lumber, especially cedar, went up on April 1st. I was told yesterday by one of my contractors that it is creeping back or falling back down at a snail's pace, but the costs are coming back down. So it could be by the time we get the money, by the time we get this organized, that the design is done, that the cost would be back down again. So you're going to get a lot of support from CPC and a lot of the sports leagues that use those fields, and we're embarrassed by the porta potties when other teams come to play here on the travel soccer, lacrosse, et cetera, et cetera. You'll get a lot of support from us at town meeting on going forward with making up the shortfall. So I agree with Jason. I think it should go forward.
Madam Chair.
Living, yes.
Sorry, I think the DPW director could certainly speak if need be on the history of the project as well. And it is largely as outlined by Ms. Williams. It did start out as a much bigger project. It's come down to where we are now. And I think if people want to see this project go forward, then we would put forward an additional appropriation at this town meeting. And if they vote it, great. And if they don't, then we wait.
Thank you. Joanna Roach.
Hi, thanks. I completely agree with Libby and what Linda said. I think this project has a lot of support with families who have long used that field and the porta potties and the situation. And we had this debate at the Finance Committee. The project has been considerably scaled back, but I do think that you will find support for moving forward now instead of waiting. So thank you.
Thank you. Rick Atherton.
Hopefully I'm unmuted, Dawn.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. You know, I've said this before, but this is an opportunity for the board to thoroughly and quite frankly, openly, from a broader community perspective of the Harbor Master Building. I know the current configuration is staff supported strongly as the only possible solution. I think there are a number of other solutions. I think the sort of the use of the building can be disassembled and perhaps used in other ways, other places, I mean. I've said before, across the street. And I just don't think building a structure of that magnitude on an area which is subject to sea level rise makes sense in the long term. And I would hope the board would take that openly and constructively and review the configuration of the needs for that facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So I think we've got kind of two parts here.
Yeah, you don't need to make it a decision tonight on the Harbor Master Building, because that's not a town meeting anyway. At some point, obviously, we'll need to figure out how to move forward with it. But I think we do need to understand as soon as possible if we're going to be putting forward a technical amendment for the field house.
Okay, so Melissa.
Dawn, are you looking for a motion about whether or not to bring that forward to town meeting?
I think it would be helpful for us to have a motion.
Well, I'll make the motion to bring the revised scope of work and cost for the Nobody or Fields project to town meeting to see if they, I don't know how you want to phrase the motion, but I'd like it to be.
So the town
fair?
side.
Yeah.
Is there?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Let me understand, is the motion to bring this to this town meeting out? You guys are all frozen for a minute.
Oh, yeah, it's to allow the technical amendment to go forward with the new dollar figure for this town meeting, to leave it up to the voters.
Yeah, I oppose that. I think we should delay. And in both cases, we should delay and we should research and come back with something other. So I'm against.
This is just for the field house. We're not making any decisions on the Harbor Master Building this evening.
I understand, but so the field house, I still favor delaying and and doing and rebidding and making sure we're bidding it as widely as possible and getting as many people involved as possible and getting the price down. So I'm against.
Okay, thank you. I'll vote in favor. So that's a 4-1.
Thank you. Next is the preseason beach update. I think we do have a PowerPoint in the packet as well for this item. Okay, so when I developed this presentation, there were some things in place that now are not in place, which is why there's the strikeouts that you see there. So I kind of wanted you to see what we sort of started out with and what we've now ended up with. So they're just listed here. We were going to be having the same sort of beach guidance as we did last year, but now none of that is in effect anymore. So we're pretty much back to normal with regard to beach management. We'll monitor the beaches for underage drinking and things of that nature that aren't really permitted at beaches, as a matter of course, and monitoring permanent events for compliance. And we do have pre, mid, and post-season coordination meetings with town agencies and others. We're also going to have a pre-4th of July meeting pretty soon. Next slide. Okay, public beach concerns. I guess I'll take us through some of this, and then the various departments can speak on their management plans for the summer and the prep. So this is just a list of the public beaches and what some of the concerns are. There's some concerns at Dionis with erosion. There's some debris in the water at Nantucket. There's been some debris there for a while now. It's very, very difficult to remove it. And there's some erosion at Cisco as well. Most likely it'll need a ramp. Next slide. Okay, natural resources. I'm going to have whoever's on for natural resources take us through this and answer any questions. Is Jeff? Jeff, you're on. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I had some difficulty a second ago, but just to run through it really briefly for everybody. Again, we are having our regular protected species monitoring. We have a couple of seasonal staff that we bring in, and then Vince Murphy and I also kind of assist as needed. I think people are pretty familiar with the locations, but our main ones that we see a lot of are out at Smith's Point and out at Jetties Beach. And we also partner up with groups like the Conservation Foundation and Mass Audubon and trustees, and have been really trying to get out information as things get closed or things get reopened or as restrictions come in or they leave. Updated on the town website and anything that's there. People have questions, they can feel free to contact our office about that, and we're happy to try to get them to the right spot. But that's a program that's been in place now for a few decades, and I think people have settled into it and just kind of know it's easiest just to let the birds do their thing and then and get off and rolling. In addition to that, this year we have a few other things. We obviously have a regular water quality monitoring where we're looking at things like shellfish sanitation. This year, in response to that, the shellfish closure out in Nantucket that we had over the winter, we're doing some bacterial source tracking to identify where we've had that bacteria come in from over the summer as well, plus our regular nutrient monitoring and our alpha blue monitoring that we're doing. As we've all seen too, there are some other closures related to shellfish enforcement down in the lower part of the main harbor and out in Nantucket through the FDA and the Division of Marine Fisheries. So we'll be out doing that and trying to do a lot of education out on the beaches for people in those areas. And then if Vince has anything to add to this category, he's kind of our expert in this area. We're also starting to kind of ramp up and identify areas in kind of a resiliency sense on the beaches and monitoring obviously pre and post storm conditions. But what's going on with vegetation? We've had a few projects like the end of Millie's Bridge where we've done some planting and doing vegetation monitoring there. And working with some other agencies from that. But we're really trying to ramp that up to identify areas that we have concern with so we can start to do some long-term planning resiliency-wise as the coastal resiliency plan comes out. Our changes from pre-COVID, fortunately for us, we haven't had to adjust. This program was required last summer for the most part with a few tweaks and additions through water quality. But everything is pretty much moving full speed ahead for us as normal. So that's kind of our program for the summer.
Thanks, Jeff. Next slide.
I think Matt had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just a question for Jeff. I know that there's closures in the harbor and it's water quality related. Is there anything, and it was a fairly interesting SHAB meeting talking about some of that. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught part of it. And it just seems to me, you know, we've been talking about some of the things that might be necessary to do this, such as, you know, closing toilets and dye tablets and better enforcement, you know, especially during the summer months. And is there any impetus to do that at this point? It just seems like these closures are getting, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like they're bigger and longer, and you know, where do we need to go there?
Sure. So the closure that came out this year again, was a Food and Drug Administration program through their National Sulfur Sanitation, and kind of rolled out to us late this spring with requirements. We've talked to the DMF and to the FDA at this point about ways to, really kind of fine tune areas and look to, whether you want to call it like a waiver process or a secondary review process and what information they need. And they've sent that to us. And I know we've talked to the Harbor Master's office about getting, information about, how many gallons do we pump out? How do we enforce our federal no discharge zone? How are we managing boats? What pump out programs do we have available for people? How many boats actually have heads on them? I think is a question that they're looking for. So they applied this rule nationally to a lot of spots, and then secondarily came out with this: if you send us this information and work to compile it, we'll review it on a kind of a case-by-case basis. So we're working on putting that together. I think in the short term, we were at least somewhat happy to see that ours is really only tied to mooring areas. So, when we get to base scallop season, when people are out in October and the most moorings are out of the water, that closure goes away in the main harbor, except right down against like where the boat basin is and the fuel dock and those kinds of things. So we're working on it and just kind of got that information. So I think we're hoping to kind of petition them to get areas like the horse shed, especially it's a really, really active area that's in that closure now, or over kind of in the Shimo area where there's not maybe reopened or get revisited to get that restriction kind of really narrowed in to when there may actually be a significant amount of boats there. But it is something that we're actively working on. Hopefully we'll have resolved at some point here soon.
Yeah, a follow-up, if I can. I'm not asking for how do we overturn it. I'm also asking how do we, what steps do we need to do? We've been talking about some of the steps, dye tablets, and better enforcement. In a lot, and when I spoke to, this is going back 20 years from now, sort of how do you save the scallop industry? How do you save, we talk, how do we save the eelgrass? Talking to, sort of scientists 20 years ago, they said, well, this is a capacity issue. The only thing this ties completely to is to building and capacity, and you can't put this much into your harbor and expect to save those things. And so I'm looking at it, 20 years later, saying what steps do we need to take as a community, and when are we going to take them? I think the other communities require a dye tablet. They seal your head. People have seen, the discharge at night. They know it's happening. And so, so how do we as a community, increase our enforcement to protect our harbor? That's the question.
Yeah, and I think that's something that with that too, and I maybe I just misunderstood when we look at working with them to revise that. I think that enforcement piece is a big part of that, Matt. I think giving them assurances that we're doing those things and taking those steps, whether it's dye tablets or better tracking on what's coming in and out of the harbor, having a really good handle on the transient vessels that come in and who has a head and not, and how we're ensuring that they are not pumping out black water and violating the federal no discharge zone in there. I think that enhanced enforcement is going to have to be part of that process as well. So I think, when we look at our harbor water quality testing that we're doing, right, and I think that's why we're really starting to add in things like that bacterial source tracking that I kind of glossed over, is so when we look at these areas and we have concerns for fecal coliform, we can really look at it, do the additional testing, and say the fecal coliform in this area that we're getting is coming from birds, or it's coming from warm-blooded mammals. And the testing that we've kind of linked up with New Hampshire, obviously also University of New Hampshire, is able to even distinguish warm-blooded mammals, whether it's human or whether it's dogs or kind of the constituents there. So we can really start to look at that and identify those problems kind of by local area. That plus what the health department's doing in our regular sampling, I think we're really going to start to really narrow in on each kind of specific area, so we can either target enforcement or target management options to cut down on those inputs to hopefully prevent it, and maybe in areas where we're seeing impacts, reduce those impacts. So I think that additional testing plus kind of enhanced enforcement is definitely the key for us going forward here in the short term.
To add a little bit to what Jeff is saying too, I don't know if the harbor master is still on, but we have a robust pump out program. We are, maybe the chief can address this. I think we're about to get another pump out boat. Correct?
I'll try to throw in, yes. I mean, we definitely have one of the, oh, sorry, if Sheila's here, I'll let her speak, because she's definitely way more versed in this than me.
I'm not, Sheila.
Yeah, I'm still here. We definitely have a really strong pump out program. We do pump outs 12 hours a day. We have provided this information. We report how many gallons that we pump of product we pump every year. We have 2 potential pump out boats. We have pump out facilities at our docks. They do at, they have a portable one at Great Harbor. They have one at the boat basin. There's plenty of opportunities. We do patrols. When we do check boats, we do make sure that the heads are in the locked position, so there's no possibility of a discharge over the side. We're on the water, as I said, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless it's blowing 50. And we're checked. We go to every single boat, every single day for a pump out. The problem is they wanted the number of boats on moorings. They didn't take into consideration that most of the boats on our moorings in Nantucket Harbor are little 17-foot center console runabouts that don't even have head facilities, nor anybody staying on board them at nighttime.
Yeah, to add to that briefly, and I apologize for stepping out of turn here for a second. When the National Shellfish Sanitation Program rolled this closure out, they looked at all mooring areas and any area that had greater than 20 boats. They assume that all boats are discharging black water in the program. So any area that has greater than 20 boats, they automatically move to this kind of conditional approval where when the moorings are in the water, those areas are closed. And then after they did that, they said communities then have the opportunity to provide the additional information, which we've started to do, to try to roll those back, starting from things being restricted as opposed to going restricted. So they rolled that out. I mean, I know communities like Harwich, their commercial shellfishing industry has essentially been closed in its entirety from this closure, and they're actively trying to ratchet this back. I mean, their commercial oystermen and commercial cohoggers are not able to harvest because of these closures right now that came down. So it's something that, we are looking at very seriously, and obviously don't want to be in the situation moving forward if that program changes its conditions. And I think being proactive and I think we're really lucky that we have a federal no discharge zone in place and have had a pump out boat for quite some time. And we have, active programs in that with the boat basin and other facilities that we have a chance to work with them to get something, to get areas reopened, and are at a plot where we can really start to identify area by area to try to improve conditions too. So I think we're in a lot better spot than a lot of places, but definitely have work to do.
Proceed or?
Yes. Oh, wait, Sheila, did you have your hand up? Or is that?
No, I'm good. No, I'm good. I covered everything, I think.
Okay. We do have one public hand up, but do you want me to wait till the end of the presentation?
No, they can be asked whenever.
Okay, Rick Atherton, did you have a question?
Don, thank you. What? An echo.
Oh, yes, there's quite
Is that on my end?
Try again.
I'll try again. I just have a general comment, not so much a question. I think we have, all kinds of pump outs and requirements, and we're doing great things. But, this has been going on for what, 20 years? And I'm not sure I feel confident that we've reached a condition that helps regenerate the harbor's water quality. And I hate to go back to Mr. Fee's comment on what's sustainable in our harbor. I never hear town administration suggesting that we would all be better off with 500 moorings instead of 1,000. I'm just making up the numbers to give you an impression of the issue. And I think those are the kinds of really significant, substantial discussions the select board needs to have to deal with this issue if you really want to deal with it. You know, enforcement only goes so far, and we have a lot of boats out there and other impediments to water quality that I think you could deal with if you chose to. Thank you.
That sounds like a great task for the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, which typically advises on things like that. I don't think we've ever gotten a recommendation of that nature. It's not something town administration would typically put forward without a consult with them. Next is the police. Could I get that PowerPoint back up? Sidebar on harbor water quality as well. At some point soon, Jeff, I think we are going to be getting the 2020 water quality testing results for both harbors and other areas that will hopefully help inform some of this as well. Because some of those numbers have improved, some have not, but it'd be a good refresher on all of that. We don't have a date yet, do we?
We just got the final report back, and Thais has kind of written up a draft of her normal executive summary for everybody. I know that the full report's available on the town website right now, but we'll have that to everyone hopefully in the next week to 10 days.
Terrific. Thanks, Jeff. The police program is pretty much the same as it's been. Chief, do you want to quickly give a summary of this slide here?
Yeah, we've got just enough CSOs to minimally patrol or conduct all the patrols we normally would on the beaches. In addition to that, which isn't mentioned here, is we're increasing through Sheila's department the training and the patrols done by lifeguards along the South Shore and the North Shore, which will extend our knowledge base, so to speak, as to identifying ongoing problems. Currently, there's 6 CSOs that'll be out there 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Depending on conditions at the beach and the usage, we could extend those hours if need be. And we're adding another little bit to their training this year that's relevant to some of the issues that have been going on. And that's, we're training them more about unleashed dogs and pets and stuff at beaches. Now, CSOs do not have the authority to enforce that law, but they'll work with on-duty patrol officers when they identify, well, first of all, their goal will be to educate. And then if the people don't pay attention or if they don't do what they're asked, then they'll work with on-duty patrol officers to take enforcement action for unleashed dogs on beaches. There are really no changes from the pre-COVID. And for those of you that are looking to get your discounted island registered vehicle permit for the year, you missed the date. The prices went up June 1st to $100, and they're available at 4 Fairgrounds Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Next slide. Oh, was that it?
Quick comment, Libby.
Sure.
I'm really happy to see the sort of the focus on the dog leash law on the beaches. That was a tough. We had a few tough incidences last summer, so I'm very happy to see that that's getting increased attention. And so I want to thank the chief for that.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, Marine Division, Harbor Master. Sheila, you want to take us through the lifeguard program and the prep?
Sure. So far we have 54 lifeguards hired for all 9 beaches that we got. They're going to start their training starts on June 14th. The stands will be manned on June 30th. They will be doing ATV patrols on the weekend of the 19th and 20th, and on the weekend of the 26th and 27th. We will be ready to have the stands manned and ready to go. And we're gonna, as Chief said, we're gonna have a couple extra patrols on the North Shore. It worked out really well for us last year. We patrolled around Eel Point and 40th Pole, which was helpful. We ended up doing quite a few rescues. So we feel really good. We were really fortunate. Most communities didn't get enough people to apply. We had 95 applicants for our program. So I think it speaks to what these guys have done with the program. But yeah, we're ready. We'll be ready. We put out the beach reports daily. We put it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We put out on 97.7, we do a morning beach report. We send something to the Inky Mirror, and there's a couple other places that we send a beach report to, and anybody can call the beach hotline to get the report of what the conditions are at the beach, which beaches are safest to go to, and what our concerns are on each given day at every beach that we guard. And the last thing is about the shark. We're working with the Great White Shark Conservancy group. They are putting some tagged receivers around the island on the South Shore, some on the North Shore, and off of Great Point. And we'll be working with them to have it monitored. We do have the protocol in place that if we do have a sighting, we will have it confirmed by a trained first responder, police, fire, CSO, lifeguard. And then we'll clear the water for a certain amount of time. We'll make a phone call to the Great White Shark Conservancy, see if they have a plane up, have a plane do a flyover for us, and see if the shark is still spotted in the area before we let people back in. But our protocol has been working pretty good. We did not have a whole lot of sightings last year. And the ones that we did, we were successful in clearing the water.
Thanks, Sheila. I think you may have another slide.
Okay.
Just with the
seasonal staff on the
town pier.
At the town pier. Yep, we have 16 seasonal staff hired to date to run the waterways, recreational boating safety patrol, do the beach cleanup, take care of the transient vessels, manage the pump out programs, manage the mooring compliance programs, deal with the transient boaters. We're open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. And we're there, ready to go. And we're on no wake patrols and safety patrols all day, every day.
Thanks, Sheila. And the marine mammal stranding team is a coordinated effort too, right?
Yep. And sorry about that. Yeah, and the marine mammal stranding team, we work with them. People can call the beach hotline. Beach hotline is monitored 24 hours a day. We come and we get messages if we're required. If we do get a report of a stranded mammal, then we give them a call. And if we can handle it, we handle it. If the animal is dead, if we can pick it up, we do. If not, we work close with the DPW and they send a machine down to take care of it for us if it's too heavy for us.
Thanks, Sheila. And you mentioned, the beach hotline. That's helpful for people to call. I think Sheila developed that number a few years ago, so there's a central number to call if people have beach issues, and the harbor master's office can determine where it should go, if not specifically to them. Great, thank you, Sheila. Next slide is licensing. Amy, you want to take us through?
Sure. We're going back to pre-pandemic when we permit small number of catering events, more like when some local caterers have small dinners and things on beaches per the beach regulations and conditions. Only one permit per day per location. And again, it's 2 licensed caterers when they're serving food and perhaps alcohol on a public beach, which Obviously, alcohol is not allowed in glass on a public beach, so we permit those that are licensed. And again, no more than 3 permits per week per location. The hours are limited only between 5 and 10 p.m. They're, of course, responsible for removing all trash gathered at the site. General limit is about 25 to maybe 35. We also work with Land Bank. They permit for those that are on their beaches as well and work with us if there's alcohol involved. Private and for-profit events. There is a limited number of events per the concession contract at Sandbar at Jetties Beach. For those licensed premises for weddings, things of that sort, we generally direct there. And again, nonprofit fundraising events, really only considering pre-existing events that have happened before on a very limited basis. I guess, we were having this under review now that things are fully open. And again, any event over 250 still requiring a public hearing. So a lot of things that we've had in the past are not happening. Some of the triathlon, things of that sort, aren't happening this year, but we are considering those that come to us that were pre-existing. But as of right now, just a few catering events as they normally are.
Thanks, Amy. Public Works is next. Rob, quick overview.
Thank you, Libby. The schedule and locations and meat and potatoes remains the same. So solid waste and recycling is the townwide core barrels, the beach waste enclosures, and those the schedule gets modified as we go deeper into the summer. Just a quick highlight on the Moby structure that was unveiled and dedicated on Friday out at Surfside. Thank you for those who attended. That was fantastic. We have porta potties, the pump out schedules listed there. The one thing that has changed with the porta potty cleaning is the cleaning schedules there. The disinfection was a daily service that was added at the outset of COVID and has changed. As of just recently, in consultation with the health director, he's determined that the risk is minimal and the disinfection will go down to twice a week. And that's worked out with the vendor for Friday and Monday. It's likely that that service will be eliminated back to the regular scheduled cleanings only for next year in the contract. So just something to point out there. Facilities, we respond to the concessionaires and Dionis, and as listed there, parking, and that those the lots are graded and maintained both with signage and surface as needed. You'll see a few different changes to the configuration of the lots this year. We've had some time to rethink those, and we've actually been able to add parking to a couple of the facilities, which is hopefully helpful.
Thank you, Rob. Culture and tourism. Janet, you want to tell us what's going to happen in Children's Beach this summer?
Yeah, well, like a lot of organizations on the island, we're suffering with trying to find staffing to make sure that we can offer these opportunities. So, but our plan is to offer pickup games Monday to Thursday through the Sunday night concerts, and maybe have puppet shows on Saturday morning. We're still not eager to do tie-dye clinics because most of the population that attends those are kids under 12 and they haven't been vaccinated yet. And so we're being conservative about not offering that. And we are looking at returning to Friday night movie programs. There are several cultural organizations that are offering activities at Children's Beach this summer, and those will be coming out from the Parks and Recs group to entertain our visitors and residents.
Thank you very much, Janet. Is the fire chief still on?
I am.
Thank you. All right, Steve.
All good. Good evening, everybody. We're going to be doing our targeted beach patrols. We started this last summer. It was very successful. in education more than anything as to what is allowed. And we came up with this pamphlet last year with a QR code that people could download and get their information. And this is all on our website. You can go to the next slide, please.
Next slide. Yeah.
So the main part for everybody's education is what is allowed is a cooking fire is allowed on the beach in public places. That's in the Mass General Law. Key things is it has to be used for cooking. It has to have clean wood. You can't use construction debris or anything like that. It has to be away from combustibles. It has to be somebody over the age of 18, and it has to be reasonable. Reasonable is meaning you can sit next to it with a small stick and cook a marshmallow. It can't be a bonfire. Those aren't allowed. Next slide, please. Nope, that's my last one.
Thank you very much.
All good. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So the land bank has a role as well with beaches, and they do these things that are listed here. They do have some porta potties at 40th Pole, and they do some road maintenance and parking area maintenance at their beaches. Next slide. Concerns. We have some ongoing concerns going into the summer. We had a lot of complaints last year about takeout food trash at various beaches. We are working with establishments in areas nearby those beaches to request their assistance if at all possible. The town itself has limited staff to do more pickups. We are looking into the possibility of engaging private haulers to help us out with that. We have, there's going to be crowds at the beach this summer, and our enforcement capabilities are a bit limited. So our emphasis is going to be on outreach, just for people to be safe and responsible with their behavior. Parking lots most likely will exceed capacity in certain areas, and there may be issues to address with respect to overflow to private property, which does happen at the more popular beaches from time to time. And I think we'll just do our best to address all of those things noted. I think that's it. Yeah. Any other questions? Don't see any? Okay. The next item is proposed amendments to the harbors and waterways regulations. So just so the board knows, I think we've been working on a major effort to codify all the regulations into a general code-like book like we have with the town code. And that is a project that got derailed by COVID. We're back onto it now. And I'm trying to work on developing a better, more transparent and laid out policy for the board for when, or really kind of administrative, for when regulations are being proposed or are proposed to be amended, which involves things like having the departments meet and determine what additional resources might be needed for the changes, if any, review it with applicable boards, committees, or staff, get any input from them, and then review it with, if it's a separate department, they would review those things and then come to town admin with it. And then one of the steps would be, we come to the board if it's one of your regulations and determine if you are ready to move ahead with a public hearing. I think because sometimes we've went ahead with a public hearing and then found out it wasn't such a good idea at all to begin with. So we want to get better at implementing that kind of a review process with you all. So I think there is information in your packet. There's a summary in your packet about these regulations. And they, I think, started out with an intent to sort of clean up some areas where dinghies have been allowed to sort of congregate and have started to become bothersome to homeowners in the area. And it's, for the most part, private property that we're talking about. So we're trying to be respectful of it and keep things cleaned up, but also be responsive to boaters who need these vessels to get to their boats. So there's some changes there, and some other changes came about as a result of the review of the regulations. And I think either Charlie or Sheila could take us through these other items. And I believe they were reviewed with the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, which, as I understand it, really didn't have any comments on it. Charlie or Sheila, one of you guys want to take us through? Don't everybody jump at once.
I guess if Charlie's not here, I'll do it. Yeah, so the major changes were, they had in addition to the language to permit dinghies, this is because we were getting some complaints from those people. So it's going to add a dinghy permit for those holders of a current boat mooring in that area, and it's going to be for Cathcart and Monomoy, where the dinghy racks are. They have big concerns about kayaks. So kayaks would, if a kayak is being used as a dinghy, we could permit it that way. Unpermitted dinghies could be removed from the rack and storage areas by the harbor master's office, and the proposed permit fee is $25. So that was that. There was a language change to remove the annual requirement for most slip holders to participate in the slip lottery. Prior to the adoption of Mass General Law in 1990, the town was allowed to assign slips on an available basis. Slip holder would be able to rely on the slip space for as long as they paid the annual fee and complied with the town's regulations. To be in compliance with the procurement law, the town initiated a lottery to assign each slip annually. The downfalls to it is the slip holders never know from year to year if they would be able to keep their boat slip. As a result, slip holders kept their moorings in an event they did not get a slip the following year. In 2000, the procurement law was changed to exempt the town from that requirement to have an annual slip lottery. Right now, we're the only town in Massachusetts that still conducts the lottery. Everybody else does it by wait list. This revised language will keep the lottery to award any vacant slips, but allow current holders in good standing to keep their slip from year to year. And this will open up, the slip holders would give up their moorings. So this would open up voting to more people. It standardizes payment and default procedures for both recreational and commercial slip holders. Shab's only comment on that was they would like to see us keep the lottery for half of the slips and then do the wait list for the other half. But our recommendation is to go forward with just the wait list like everybody else in the state does. And then we added a new subsection about liveaboards. This provision is added to address the ever-increasing use of moored boats as Airbnb rentals. What we are seeing is a person renting a mooring for the summer and putting a vessel on it that has several staterooms where people can sleep, then offering the vessel for rent on a weekly basis. People are also doing it on their private mooring. The problem is that the people who are renting the vessel as an Airbnb have no idea how to drive the boat, how to operate the boat, how to operate any of the mechanical systems, how to get a pump out or do a pump out, or know any of the safety requirements. They don't know what to do in the case of an emergency. They're unable to move the boat if we have to kick the boats off their moorings and send them into the boat basin or send them to another safe haven if we're expecting a hurricane or a big blow. So this requirement would have us, would make it so that the owner of the boat be present on board, or a person who is a United States Coast Guard licensed captain on board who would have to be familiar with pump out procedures and mechanicals and how to operate the boat. We added a liveaboard registration form requirement at Shab's request. We added a liveaboard boater insurance requirement at Shab's request. We added a requirement that any liveaboard be able to motor to pump out to the pump out stations or at the town pier or boat basin. And this requirement is mostly in the shoulder seasons. If the pump out boat operators have all gone back to school or were not available, they can still get the pump outs when they need to. And then the rest of the changes were just minor grammar, spelling, and format changes.
Thanks, Sheila. So I think we wanted to know if the board has any questions and if you're willing to proceed with the public hearing.
I support proceeding with the public hearing, but I do have a question on the mooring permits. It says only Massachusetts registered vessels shall be eligible for mooring permits. What about situations where they're federally documented and not registered in the state of Massachusetts, or where a boat is on Nantucket part of the time and in another state during the winter, and it might be registered there or have a different hail port?
Yeah, I can answer that. Documented vessels clearly will be fine. The big thing is for excise tax purposes. So if they can prove that they've paid their excise tax to the town of Nantucket, then we leave them be.
Just suggestion that maybe needs to be reworded and clarified. But Melissa and then Matt.
Thanks. I like the suggestion about the town pier moorings, but I can't help but think about the few people who put their names in every year to try to get a slip. And so how would you start that process, Sheila? Is it people who have a slip already, if they're in good standing, would be allowed to maintain that? Or how do you start the program?
That was our plan, is just to have the people, because we already do have a wait list going of the people that did not get a slip. So we have a pretty good wait list going already.
Yeah.
So that process could be what it is.
Okay. And Don, I support bringing this forward for a public hearing also. Thank you.
So Matt?
Can the owners of the slips, can they transfer those, Sheila, or does it only have to go through you?
And that it would have to go through us, just to make sure, for size reasons and different things like that.
All right, so we're not creating you're not creating a value. You're not creating something that they can sell the boat to someone else and the person gets the slip. They have to hand their ticket in if it changes hands, correct?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Now, and then the other question, that's great. The other question, did you guys talk about even not allowing Airbnb? That seems to me, sort of heading down a slippery slope of turning boats into hotel rooms. Seems like something, when we're having the issues that we already have in the harbor anyway, with pollution and other aspects, it just seems, did we even discuss not doing it at all?
Yes, sir, we did. And I think I was told that we weren't allowed to prohibit them. So that's why we went this way, which makes it so that the owner is on there and a licensed captain is on there, because that is how we would mitigate the pollution problems. But I mean, we can certainly look into it more, but I did ask the question about eliminating them altogether. And I think we were told that we're not allowed to do that.
Christy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to say I support bringing it forward for a public hearing. And one question for Sheila on the live-up boards is limiting those with the restrictions that is being proposed. Is that something that other coastal towns are doing across Massachusetts or the United States, or is that just something unique to us?
No, I looked into it. It's a national problem. They're having problems down in Florida. So, we saw some things on Facebook about some stuff going on down in Florida, in some southern communities. So, we look closely at it. I've also got the Coast Guard looking hard at it to see, because it's a fine line, whether it's a vessel for hire, but where it's not moving through the water, the Coast Guard's kind of siding with it. It is not moving through the water, so it's not a vessel for hire in that way. And so that's why we chose to put the caveats on that we did. But I'm really paying close attention to what other communities nationally are doing with it. I've talked with Newport, I've talked with several places, but it is becoming a thing.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions? Do you want a motion to move it forward to a public hearing or just?
I think a consensus is okay if that's okay with you all.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so we'll move this ahead to a public hearing then. Next up is just the monthly town management activity report. And I think that is in the packet. Just to give a little bit of an overview on things with regard to plans, reports, and studies. We are trying to get a workshop check-in together with the board, hopefully sometime in July. And as you know, we're working on our facilities master plan workshop for June 28th. The Nantucket Water Quality Improvement Plan, which has resulted in a recommendation for sewering Nantucket. We have our consultant working on an update to what the potential cost of that project might look like and what the route might look like. And they are just really getting underway with that now. Facilities master plan, I talked about a bit. PFAS and the townwide risk assessment. This is an ongoing issue that is being worked on all the time by our project manager, Chuck Larson. And I think I saw some email today with respect to a visit by CDM Smith to the island at the end of June to start really looking at potential risk areas. A lot of meetings going on, PFAS being one of them. Hopefully I'm going to move to in-person meetings with the department heads as I can in this month. Cape Cod managers most recently talked about the American Rescue Plan funding. Town meetings, lots of discussion about that at those meetings. The commuter shuttle and parking at 2 fairgrounds, thanks to Paula, NRTA administrator, that we have a commuter shuttle program as best as we're going to get it, I think, for the summer. Solid waste long-term planning. Typically we have weekly meetings. We haven't been able to do that quite so much lately, but I think I just saw one from Rob for next week. As you all know, our public building access restrictions were lifted as of May 17th, and we do have people coming in to public buildings. Brian and I are still trying to get our arms wrapped around the American Rescue Plan funding, what it can be used for, and some recommendations to be coming to the board. And we had a town admin retreat earlier in May. Various projects are underway. COVID is, even though it sounds like it's over, it's not totally over. We are continuing to receive some level of inquiries about things, and vaccination planning and things of that nature are continuing to take some time. Not as much, but it is something that we are still monitoring and trying to get outreach about. Harbor Master building, Nobody Field House we talked about tonight. Downtown sidewalk project hopefully is getting ready to conclude. You had an update last week at your meeting about the island home. I need to get convened with some various internal staff and maybe one or two of you all to figure out what next steps are for the island home. I won't review everything here. The police reform bill analysis. The chief has given me a memo about that. I have not had a chance to go through it in detail. We were preparing to review that with you in June. That might have to go into July. Town meeting prep is taking a little more time than I thought it was going to take. As you know, we have the NCA forum, Nantucket Community Association forum, the annual forum that will be Tuesday, July 13th, starting at 9:30 a.m. At this point, it's virtual. I did ask them recently if they thought they might want to do that in person, and I haven't quite heard back yet. Construction of Wade Drive is commenced. Committee appointment process, of course, was underway, and you will have post discussion about your 2021 annual appointments in the beginning of July. We are talking actively about a recreation position. One of the technical amendments at town meeting will be to reduce the community school budget by $50,000 and put $50,000 into the town admin budget just for now, for fiscal year 22. Community school is not able to continue providing the services they've been providing through an MOU we have with them to manage the summer tennis program and manage the scheduling at the playing fields. So we are going to be hiring our own person to do that for the summer. But we are also looking actively at what a recreation position in the town could look like. I noted there was some discussion at the Government Study Committee apparently about the Park and Recreation Commission. I definitely am going to have some things to say about that when and if this report gets to the board, especially about decentralizing who is appointed and who they report to and separate departments and all of that. So we are actively, though, working on a potential job description, funding for most likely fiscal 23, not necessarily fiscal 22, because obviously we're about to go into that without funding for a full-time year-round position. But we're working on where that position might best fit in an existing town department. So I think we're actually kind of excited about that and hope that it will address some community concerns. The waterways amendments, harbor regs we talked about tonight. Several staff have been doing MCPPO, that's Mass Certified Public Purchasing Official. That's supposed to say annual training requirements. And those are pretty time consuming. They often take 3 full days, several times a year to maintain certification. Items that have been on hold due to COVID are listed here. Some of them we're trying to get back into the queue. Some of them we've been working on, and some are just sitting there because we can't get to them yet. Couple personnel things. Collective bargaining negotiations continues with pretty much all of our unions. The Island Home Administrator, we have just filled that position. I think you may know we thought we had filled it, and then it turned out that wasn't going to be permanent. So now we fortunately have secured a permanent person who will be here within the next week or so, and we will probably bring him to a meeting soon so you all can meet him. Transportation planner is still underway, but the title, I believe, has changed to something slightly different so that the something of a reclassification could occur to hopefully attract more candidates. We are probably on the verge of hiring a new deputy fire chief to replace our longtime deputy fire chief, Bob Bates, who will be retiring at the end of the month. And we are in the process of searching for a deputy DPW director for facilities. Oh, I did want to mention, I forgot to say this. With regard to town meeting, our public outreach coordinator, Florencia Rulo, put together several videos that explain the warrant articles that have associated ballot questions, and they are really excellent. They're very short, but they give you a really good idea of what the project is about, what it costs, what the tax rate impact is, and so there's some other information too. She did a really excellent job on it. So if you all haven't seen it yet, please go to the website and look at it. They were featured in the Town Manager e-newsletter, which went out last week. It was dedicated to town meeting. That's about it.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Now, next up, we have select boards reports and comments. This is just a discussion item regarding options for a community impact fee. This is something we never really discussed when we instituted the short-term rental tax. We did discuss the wastewater, and at the moment have opted out of instituting that. This is something that would also require a vote of town meeting. But I was just curious about it because it's come up recently with all of the discussion of short-term rentals and so forth, and asked John to prepare a memo that's in the packet on kind of what's been happening with it, if other communities have done it, how do you even track it, those kind of things. But I know that John's here tonight to just take us through it. It's no decision points, just a little discussion and tutorial. Jason?
Just some comments, Madam Chair. I did get some questions on why did this come up now, and I think it's good to have an explanation for the board to understand in the public what this looks like. We really didn't know anything a year ago, and I thought your memo, John, was helpful of what some other towns are doing. It's not that many. I think there were only 6 or 7 that implemented it. So if it does come up at town meeting, we're a little more educated. I don't know if it will or not, but just to kind of understand the whole picture. So I really enjoyed your memo, John. That was helpful.
I don't hear that very often, Jason. My memos are enjoyed. But I can give you just a very, very quick overview, maybe for the public as well. So when the short-term rental law was put in place, in addition to the local option rooms excise tax, and also the Cape and Islands 2.75%, the legislature added 2 potential community impact fees that are local options. Now, the difference is it only applies to short-term rentals, not to hotels and inns, et cetera. And there's some fairly technical requirements. Both of them require adoption in a separate vote at town meeting. And if you do adopt it, you have to specify how much your community impact fee will be. It has to be a specific percentage, but not in excess of 3%. The two community impact fees are one for professionally managed units, and that is if an operator operates one of 2 or more short-term rental units on the island, in essence. That has to be adopted first. And if you adopt that, then you can also adopt the second one, which is a community impact fee on owner-occupied units. And as I said, you cannot adopt the fee on the owner-occupied units unless you first adopt the fee for the professionally managed units. If you adopt it, when the law was first written, the towns had to collect the fee themselves, but there was an amendment to the law so that the Department of Revenue will collect those 2 fees and then remit the amounts to the town quarterly, along with your regular local option rooms tax. One important factor is that if you do adopt either or both fees, a minimum of 35% of those fees have to be used for either affordable housing or for infrastructure. And those monies, that 35%, are held in what's called the Receipts Reserved for Appropriation account and can only be appropriated at town meeting, as I said, for either affordable housing or infrastructure. The other thing to keep in mind is that you have the option, if you adopt these fees, to also specify that they be deposited into a stabilization fund. That's a separate vote at town meeting. It requires a 2/3 vote. And I think we've talked about Article 38 is a good example. That's on the warrant. That is to dedicate 66% of the local options rooms tax. There is the option you could do something similar with these community impact fees. It has to be a minimum of 25% of the revenue. Money goes into a stabilization fund, can only be appropriated out by a 2/3 vote of town meeting. But you could reserve it, for example, for affordable housing. And if it's at least 35%, then you've complied with the requirements of the law. The Department of Revenue maintains a website that shows the communities that have adopted the community impact fees, and they are mostly the larger cities, such as Boston has done it, Somerville has done it, Cambridge has done it. The closest comparison that I could find was Plymouth has done it as well. And according to the DOR website, they collect about $50,000 in Plymouth. But I think Brian has taken a look at what the expected or the likely revenue would be if the town were to adopt a 3% community impact fee on both the professionally managed units and the owner occupied units. And with that, I'll leave it up. I'll hand it over to Brian to talk about the estimated amounts.
I did it on the professionally managed because that was only slightly easier to figure out from the short-term rental database. It's very difficult because we don't have a registry that we maintain. So it's difficult to identify exactly who would and who wouldn't be subject to these fees. It's certainly on the professionally managed, it would certainly be more than the 50,000 that Plymouth has collected to date based on the DOR website. We estimate somewhere most likely, I revised this a little bit a couple times in reviewing it. We estimate most likely no more than $400,000 annually based on what we understand to be the total number of professionally managed short-term rentals on the current most recent short-term registry. Now, one of the difficulties, quite frankly, that we have in trying to estimate this is the per night stay is all over the map. So trying to estimate this is a little bit difficult to come up with an average per night stay to then extrapolate it out. But we did use an average per night stay of around $800, and it may be substantially lower than what it actually is, but it was a starting point to try to get to some estimate. And I don't believe it would generate substantially more based on that than $400,000.
Melissa, then Matt.
Thanks, Don. John, could you repeat again for me the definition of the professionally managed units? I know that we have several families on Nantucket who own multiple properties, so it's not their primary residence, but they rent these facilities out on a seasonal basis. Would that be considered professionally managed?
So professionally managed units is defined as one of two or more short-term rental units that are located in the same city or town, operated by the same operator, and not located within a single family, two family, or three family dwelling that includes the operator's primary residence.
Okay, thank you.
So if the operator operates only one unit, it's not considered professionally managed. But if it's one of two or more that are operated by the same operator, then it's a professionally managed unit.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It makes very much sense. And to be clear, like the room occupancy tax, this is a tax paid by the tenant, not on it's part of their rent, added onto their rent. It's not taxed to the owner of the property.
Well, I think the tax is assessed against the operator, and I think this fee would be assessed against the operator as well, Melissa.
Okay, I mean, the way and maybe I'm phrasing it wrong, but if I charge $1,000 for a short-term rental to a tenant, the 11% tax is paid by the tenant. I receive those funds. I pay the Department of Revenue as the operator, but I'm not personally paying that. I'm charging it to the tenant, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so this would function the same way. I'm just trying to be clear
Yes.
that it's not an additional tax burden on the owner of the property.
No, presumably it would be passed on.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, just clarification, I think at the beginning, we didn't pass on the wastewater. We were just waiting for a further analysis of that. And so that's been held up by COVID. So that's something we still may do. We're waiting for the information and that to be done. I think I think this is something worth at least looking at or pursuing. It's a way, especially on the professional side, it's a way of fairness. Right now, the hotels and inns are paying commercial tax rates at a higher rate. And so I think it's, even though it's a small amount of money, anything we can do to sort of, level the playing field, I think we should do. I like that it's 35% has to go toward housing. We've talked about how do we get a set amount for housing. I think it's great. The other thing is we don't have a registry, and I understand that, but there's what they do in San Diego is pretty interesting. What they do is they run it out of their assessor's office, and what they'll say is they assume that a property is used as a short-term rental or used as a, in that category, unless somebody signs under pains of perjury that it isn't. And so it's actually kind of a good way. It's a great way to do it because you're putting the burden back on people to tell the truth. Now, not everyone will, but for the most part, they will. And they're signing you don't have to create a whole nother bureaucracy. You're not hiring 5 people and asking them to knock on doors or anything else. You're just asking, people to disclose their use. And so I think there's a way to do it here if and when we ever need to know those numbers and get to it. And I think San Diego is a good example of someone who does it and does it very effectively.
Just on that, Matt, we have discussed that internally quite a bit. However, my understanding is that that's not permissible in Massachusetts and/or it hasn't been tested. John?
I'm sorry, Libby, what is not permissible?
Assessing properties as commercial if they are short-term rentals. And
I think what Matt was saying is the hotels are taxed at a commercial rate, correct, Matt? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, there's 2 parts. Yeah, that's number one. They're assessed at a higher rate than residences are. And it isn't necessarily what you're thinking, Libby. It's a business license, basically, and I think it's $60. So you have to have a business license in order to do business. And we're allowed as a municipality to have, require our businesses to have a license. So it isn't, we're not going as far as you've stated. It's basically a way to identify very easily which properties are being used as businesses and which ones are being used as residences.
And I would also point out that under the short-term rental law, there is a section that authorizes towns to enact bylaws that essentially create a local licensing program and the ability to charge fees. So you have that option if you wanted to pursue it. I will tell you that Article 90 does 2 things that are really quite different. One thing Article 90 does is to limit the length of the short-term rentals during the year, but there's a whole section in Article 90 that would essentially create a registration inspection system. And that's something that I think is quite separate and apart from the restrictions on the rental of units. You could certainly have a bylaw the board could consider at some point in the future of creating a registration system locally.
Melissa?
Thank you. And thank you, John, for mentioning that. I think the creation of a system like that is imperative for us. And I think we've been talking about it since before the short-term rental tax actually became law. And the inspections and registrations for safety and security reasons alone are enough to do that. So I'm fully in support of continuing that conversation, regardless of, or in spite of what happens at town meeting, or regardless, whatever that phrase is.
Christy, and then I do have a public hand raised.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions for John. For the 35% that could go towards infrastructure, how is that defined? Could that go towards town facilities, or would that just be for road improvements, bike paths and such?
So, Christy, the statute merely says infrastructure. It doesn't specify. So I would certainly, I would interpret it to mean what is commonly understood as infrastructure, which is sort of funny given the debate that's going on at the national level in terms of what in fact is in infrastructure. And I think it certainly would cover roads, it would cover water, it would cover sewer and the like. But I think you could probably define it even more broadly if you chose to do that. And that might be something you would want to do with a regulation.
Okay. And with the Cape and Islands, the water protection, if we were at a later date to impose that, could we do both? Could we have the community impact fee and the water?
Yes. In Nantucket, the select board would have to vote to opt in to the fund. But that 2.75% never comes to the town directly. It goes to essentially to the fund that's administered by the Cape Cod Commission. And they are already starting to provide grants to cities and towns, well, towns really. So that would come back to you indirectly through grants. You would not see that revenue received directly by the town.
Okay. And my last question, if Article 38 passed at town meeting on Saturday, and then at a future town meeting, if this were to pass, would that provide additional funding to the article in Article 38, or would this be separate? Would it be two different stabilizations?
It's separate because Article 38 only covers the local option rooms excise tax.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I suppose you could amend the vote in the future to include sort of like what we did with marijuana, which was both the marijuana tax and the host community fee going into one stabilization funds. So that could be done in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, and I just wanted to clarify, I didn't mean to say that we had completely set aside the wastewater forever, but at this time we hadn't opted. We have to opt in rather than opting out. Henry Sanford has his hand raised. Henry?
Hi, Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for calling on me. I just had a couple of comments. First of all, Brian, the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers has been conducting a survey of the short-term rental market amongst its members to kind of understand the frequency of stays and the most common type of rentals and popular areas and whatnot. Kind of similar analysis that we already do to our sales market. And I will tell you, Brian, that our numbers are similar to what you came up with. The estimate that we resulted from our survey is that there's around $200,000 to $300,000 is kind of the number where we were. So you were on 400,000, we were at 300,000. I don't think that's very far off. The reason I think we might have been lower is feedback that we got from people with multiple properties is that if they knew this was coming, they would take steps to avoid it. So brothers that might hold something in a trust and hold multiple properties and operate them together. Husbands or wives, they might all take individual ownership. So essentially the number of professional units went down as a result. We expected it as a result. However, your 800 per night, I think, is low. That is probably like in professionally managed units. I think also, to say 2 or more, that's probably, maybe 10% of the market. And then when you look at like 3 or more, it's precipitously less. So there could be a lot of 2 or more there that then just get split and no longer considered professionally managed. So I would just make that one comment there. I think the tax, the market can sustain it. I mean, we did a 11.7% and no one really blinked. Prices are going up. Demand is extremely high. And just from the standpoint of the vacation rental tax, try to understand the market better and who the operators are. You know, there has been a lot of talk about the phrase mini hotels, but you know, a lot of these are operated by long owning families on the island. So, you know, we just want to, I think the tenant, it's great that the tenant can pay it because, you know, we don't want to kind of force a reverse enforce, you know, we don't want to have enforcement kind of spur this loophole, which seemed to be, you know, the large feedback, but the number seems right. So that's it.
Thanks, Henry. Hillary Rayport.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. Good evening, Madam Chair, and good evening to the board. I'm really pleased to see this topic come up for consideration. It's something that makes a lot of sense, and I just wanted to share some encouragement and enthusiasm for the topic. One of the reasons why I like it is that, you know, the short-term rental tax it's a compensatory tax. So it's collected by governments to be able to pay for the additional services and impacts on the community by having all of these stays being pushed out into the neighborhoods. And this particular tax can be focused just on the investors, the investor-owned rentals, which seems, just following the conversation in the community, to be an important point. I also have thought that it's possible, potentially, if it's of interest to the operators and to the business community, that the rooms tax could actually be lowered, and this tax could be applied if you wanted to create an instance where you were advantaging, from a pricing perspective, the hotels in the town. Because they would then pay less tax as a user, because they'd be taxed less. So I also really like that it encourages the community to put together really close tracking of exactly what's happening, and acknowledges that when you have a lot of people staying in the neighborhoods and a lot of turnover, it's a lot of trips on the road. It's much greater environmental impact than staying in a, you know, professionally managed, densely populated hotel. So there's a lot to recommend this tax. I think that's why the Baker administration recommended it when they came up with this package that could be adopted as a local option. And I really look forward to continued discussion of it. Thank you.
It's 8:42. This was, you know, just a preliminary kind of tutorial on what this tax is. It's obviously been further developed over time with how it's collected. It would have a lot of pieces that would go with it. There would be a lot of decision points and a lot of community input needed before it would get to a point of taking it to town meeting. But I think that this was, you know, a good first discussion to answer some of those questions and get some of that information out there. Anybody have anything else? Melissa?
Hey, Dawn, thank you. I have a couple of comments or questions. Last week, we heard from some neighbors on Essex Road about concerns of the pass-through traffic. And I'm just wondering if we could hear an update on if there's been any additional patrols or any additional support for that neighborhood. We had mentioned to them that we would discuss that, and we didn't today. So I'd just love to hear an update on that. If there is one, and if not, then maybe next week we could have an understanding of what's happening there.
I don't think we have an update on that. And I think there was I guess I'm just saying what I think. I don't think we have additional patrols that can go through there. And I think that sometimes we don't even have enough staff to do a detail for some of these projects. There's a lot of projects going on right now. And there's not really anywhere else for the traffic to get around to. Well, while this project is temporarily where it is. I think the project has moved to a point where Essex may not be as used as much as it was when the project was closer to being closer to Essex. We can ask the sewer director for some input on that.
That would be great. And, you know, I wonder if maybe also on this town social media platform, if we are diverting traffic that way, we can put out a public service announcement to at least please drive slowly through that neighborhood because there are so many children there. That would be a great idea. And I just want to make a comment as we're approaching town meeting. I know we talked a little bit about form of government earlier tonight, but I think having a town meeting later in the year, obviously this is COVID related, but on a Saturday is just really disenfranchising a lot of voters from being able to participate in town government this year. And it's really unfortunate how many people aren't going to be able to attend, even with the idea of bringing some of the more controversial articles up closer. I think we really need to have as a committee a further discussion about the value of the Saturday town meeting. I think so many working families just can't make a full Saturday work in their schedule. So I just wanted to make that comment. And that was it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. I've been thinking about that a lot, how challenging, and I hope that we are going to talk about a nice early April date very soon for next year. And obviously indoors, which is what drove it to a Saturday in a lot of ways. And a Saturday in June was the outdoor because of COVID. Matt?
Well, follow up on what Melissa said. I think moving it early is gonna prompt people to show up, vote their self-interest and leave. And I think that is really unfortunate. I think, they should, the opponents and proponents of 90 and 97 should be made to suffer with the rest of us and stay till the bitter end. And I think putting it up front is just making it possible for them to come in, pack the house and get what they want and leave. And I just think that's unfortunate.
Melissa?
Thanks. And Matt, I normally agree with you, but feedback I'm hearing from people is that they can't take the whole day off, but these are some issues that are really important to them and they can take 2 or 3 hours off to attend. So I hear you. And I know this is a year of exceptions and normally I'm 100%, this is participatory government. We need to sit through and stay for the long haul. But this year, I'm really concerned about lack of participation because of the timing, how busy this season is. And I know in my family, probably I'm going to be the only one that's able to show up. So it's an unfortunate reality of our community this time of year.
Thank you. That's true. And hopefully we'll get through it and hopefully we'll at least get partial attendance for part of the day and for the things that people really want to do.
I'll make a motion to adjourn if there's nothing else.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee?
Aye.
Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. I'll see you all in the morning.
In the morning.